Welcome to Novel Love Hearing. We bring you hundreds of novel audiobooks covering every genre and every kind of story you can imagine. Action? We've got it. Adventure? Absolutely. Horror? Of course. Whether it's the legendary Uchiha Massacre or outrageous tales like stealing Naruto's and Sasuke's women, you'll find it here. From epic series like One Piece, Bleach, Fairy Tail, and Hunter x Hunter, to countless other adventures, our library has it all. Love novels but don't have time to read? No worries, just plug in your earbuds, sit back, and let the story take over. Good listening, and happy hearing. Then who is it? I want to know that, too. Kuro's face was gloomy, and Goblin's face inexplicably flashed through his mind. Could it really be him? This kind of thing. Anyway, isn't it absurd that he learned the moves that I spent several years developing just by watching them a few times? Is that the Nyaban brothers? Or is it Django? Kuro was extremely upset. He didn't care about his injuries. He barely stood up and limped towards the training room. Now, there were already quite a few people gathered outside the training room. Kuro pushed aside the Nyaban brothers, who were blocking the door, and looked inside the training room with trembling eyes. Eh? Isn't that the deputy captain in there? Who else can use the pussyfoot maneuver except you? Django asked doubtfully. He had seen Kuro perform this move countless times. Even though he didn't know how to use it, he was very familiar with it. The person in the practice room at this moment was undoubtedly performing the pussyfoot maneuver. But who else could it be if it's not Kuro? The Nyaban brothers on the side also looked at Kuro in surprise. The latter was seen wrapped in bandages all over his body, unable to even walk properly. How could he look like he could continue fighting? Who's in there? The Nyaban brothers, Sham and Butchie, looked at each other, then looked at Kuro at the same time, with puzzled expressions on their faces. I want to know that too. Kuro gritted his teeth. More than half of those who once followed him gathered here. Those who didn't come were either injured or doing their respective jobs. Therefore, the people inside could not possibly be his previous crew. They could only be people who originally belonged to Gawain, or it's Gawain himself. You can learn my secret tricks just by looking at them? This joke is a bit too much. At this moment, everyone turned their eyes toward the training room. As time passed, the speed of the afterimage in the training room became faster and faster. But because the figure became more familiar with the movement, the number of times it hit the wall became less and less. Half an hour later, there was only a flickering afterimage in the training room. It was obvious that the man's control over the pussyfoot maneuver was becoming more proficient, even surpassing Kuro, the creator of this technique. The afterimage in the practice room slowly disappeared, and everyone finally saw the man's face clearly. He is tall but not fat, with smooth muscle lines and a handsome face. Who else could it be except their captain, Gawain? Seeing everyone gathered around, Gawain frowned slightly. What are you all doing here? Aren't you going to practice? Or do you need me to suppress you so that you can be self-aware? Everyone dispersed after hearing this, except for the 4 people standing at the front who stared blankly at Gawain. Captain, have you completely mastered the pussyfoot maneuver? You won't lose control like Kuro? Django opened his mouth wide. The facts were before him, and he had to believe them even if he didn't want to. And if I remember correctly, the captain has basically instructed us in our practice during this period, which means he doesn't have much time to practice. Sham exclaimed. The expression on his face was no longer one of surprise but of fear. Gawain mastered Kuro's specialty skills in such a short time and even achieved a higher degree of perfection than Kuro. Such talent is completely from a completely different world. For a moment, everyone looked at Kuro with a hint of sympathy in their eyes. Kuro's face turned pale, and the last bit of fantasy in his heart was shattered. Only then did he realize why Gawain was willing to give him advice. It was because Gawain completed this move before him, even without awakening his observation haki. By the time he really masters this move, what level will Gawain reach? At this moment, Kuro didn't even notice the glasses slowly sliding off his nose. When did you learn that? Just now. Never learned it before? No. Kuro was silent for a moment, his eyes somewhat empty. Gawain patted his shoulder and walked away. The Nyaban brothers looked at Kuro with a little sympathy and walked towards the deck side by side. Gawain's speed of progress put them under tremendous pressure. If they were left too far behind, they would undoubtedly lose their value. In the world of pirates, losing value often means being abandoned. Kuro stood in front of the door of the practice room, almost biting his teeth. A few minutes later, with a gloomy expression, he pushed his glasses up with his hand, then turned and walked towards the infirmary. I don't care what method you use. I want to start training in 3 days. That's impossible. The ship's doctor, Jayaka, spread his hands helplessly. The furious Kuro didn't care about all this. He just wanted to awaken the observation hockey as soon as possible. I don't care. You only have 3 days. Otherwise, I will throw you into the sea to feed the fish. Chapter 18, Marine Lieutenant Gawain. Of course, Kuro's request was not fulfilled. Excluding the existence of devil fruits that go beyond common sense, even the best doctors have to abide by basic rules. Without Kuro, a bronze-level talent, Gawain's daily experience points return to the expected level. It stabilizes in the range of 20 to 30. Looking at this data, Gawain fell into deep thought for a while. The experience points provided by the bronze-level talent daily practice alone have reached more than 10 points. This means that as long as there are 2 people with bronze potential on the ship, the experience provided every day can be equal to that of the more than 100 people on the ship whose potential has not been exhausted. The gap between people is secondary. The bigger problem is that the overly large pirate group has become a burden in this situation. This is especially true since Gawain has plans to travel to the Grand Line. Not to mention anything else, just the eating, drinking, defecating, and urinating of hundreds of people every day, plus the consumption of medical care and ammunition, is a huge number. The warship that Gawain had captured originally contained enough supplies to feed more than 100 people for a month. However, after the Black Cat pirates merged with them, the supplies were reduced to only enough to last for 10 days. Not to mention that there were dozens of wounded people on board, and the medical supplies on board had already been exhausted. Before heading to the Grand Line, taking the title of Warlord, and establishing a stable base, it's better to go with an elite team like the Straw Hats, Red Hair, and Roger Pirates. This will be most beneficial to my ability. After all, the experience a bronze-level talent provides is enough to rival that of 70 or 80 ordinary pirates with iron potential, and the harvesting period is significantly longer. Not to mention the silver, gold, and even diamond potential that may exist in the future. Thinking of this, Gawain made a decision in his heart. As long as the subsequent plans go smoothly and he recruits a few more crew members with outstanding potential, he will begin to streamline the team and build an elite team of crew members with potential of at least bronze or above before entering the Grand Line. Moreover, for these pirates whose potential has been exhausted, instead of heading to the Grand Line to die, it is better for them to stay in the East Blue. With their own strength and Gawain standing behind them, they can still make a living. However, the speed at which supplies on the ship were consumed was beyond Gawain's expectations. After only 3 days, food and medicine were running out. In the captain's room, Gawain and several cadres gathered here with serious expressions on their faces. "Captain, the remaining food is only enough to sustain us for 5 days. It is barely enough to support us in returning to our base on Pala Island, but the medical supplies and ammunition there have already run out. If the injured brothers don't receive timely treatment, most of them will not be able to hold on." Django reported the situation of the pirate group with a serious face. After all, he was not a cold-blooded man like Kuro, and he was unwilling to watch his crewmates die in such pain. The Nayab brothers sitting next to him were also like this. Seeing that Gawain had no reaction, they hurriedly spoke to persuade him. "Many of these people were trained by you, Captain, and they are considered elite. It would be a loss to let them die like this." Gawain raised his hand to signal the 3 of them to be quiet, then looked at Kuro. "Do you have a stable purchasing channel?" Kuro nodded. "Previously, our arms and medical supplies were supplied by Rue at Raven Harbor. But that guy had an accident a while ago and was recently released by the Marines. I'm worried that it might be a hook set by the Marines." "It doesn't matter." Gawain remained unmoved. If the Marines dared to take action, their hands would be chopped off. Snort. Kuro pushed up his glasses with a slight smile on his lips. Gawain's answer was within his expectations. He even instinctively felt that this was the way it should be. Only such courage could be worthy of Gawain's terrifying talent and monstrous power. Django and the Nayab brothers looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, when he looked at Gawain, in addition to fear, there was also a bit of respect. There are captains in this era who are willing to do this for their subordinates, but there are definitely not many. The next day, Gawain's fleet was divided into 2 groups. The 3 pirate ships that originally belonged to the Black Cat pirates, commanded by the Nayab brothers and Django, rushed back to their base on Pala Island with the wounded and some members who had no combat effectiveness. Gawain led Kuro and a ship of elite pirates, driving a Marine's warship to Raven Harbor. Many Marine uniforms are still preserved on this warship. After Gawain ordered his subordinates to change into Marine's clothes, he himself changed into a smaller version of Morgan's clothes. Then, all the pirates on the ship suddenly transformed into Marines. Especially Gawain, who was born with a handsome face. After putting on the uniform of a Marine lieutenant, he exuded an upright aura from the inside out. Judging from his appearance alone, no one would believe that he is not a Marine. The corner of Kuro's mouth twitched. If Gawain had not already taken the position of captain, he would have suspected that Gawain was an undercover agent of the Marines. You becoming a pirate is a real loss to the Marines. Kuro exclaimed in admiration, and after seeing that Gawain looked a little strange, he was too lazy to continue dwelling on this issue. He also changed into a lieutenant's uniform, and with his gentle looks and gloomy temperament, he actually looked somewhat decent. It's settled. With the way we look now, we definitely look more like regular Marines than most Marines. Gawain patted Kuro's shoulder, and the latter smiled, yes, sir. At the same time, near Raven Harbor, a huge fleet consisting of nearly 20 pirate ships slowly docked in a bay. After confirming that no one was following them, Admiral Krieg, wearing golden armor and with short lavender hair, walked out of the giant ship in the center of the fleet and came onto the deck. He picked up a telescope and looked towards the harbor at the end of his sight. Even though it was dozens of miles away from his position, he could still see countless merchant ships coming and going, each of which was fully loaded with goods from all over the world and even from the great shipping routes. It can be said to be extremely prosperous. Krieg looked at the scene in the distance and couldn't help but reveal a trace of greed in his eyes. Then he lowered his head and looked at the sea chart in his hand. Raven Harbor is one of the ports that merchant ships in the East Blue must pass through, but there is no marine branch stationed nearby. As long as we occupy this place, it is equivalent to holding the traffic of dozens of nearby cities. Even if we sit and do nothing, we will get countless money every day. By then, I'll be able to build an invincible fleet, and not even the Grand Line can stop me. At this time, a man with a striped turban and skinny figure slowly walked up to Krieg and said calmly, "Captain, what do you need me to do?" "Same old thing." Krieg glanced at the man and grinned, "Jin, you lead your men to disguise as Marines men and sneak into Raven Harbor. After eliminating the internal resistance, we will work together from inside and outside to take them down." "Yes." Jin nodded, "But the warship we robbed earlier has a minor problem. It will take some time to fix it. I'm afraid it will take a few days." Krieg nodded, "Hurry up. No one can predict what will happen if we delay for too long." "Understood." Chapter 19, You guys continue your performance, I'm watching. Jin responded expressionlessly. Although he felt somewhat ashamed of Krieg's actions, he would never resist. After all, Krieg saved his life, and this alone was enough for him to repay him with his life. Compared with this, his personal feelings are not important. Krieg glanced at Jin and guessed most of what he was thinking, but he didn't care. "For this plan, I even paid a huge price and bribed Captain Baxter of the 18th branch to obtain a Marine identity for you. It can be said to be a perfect disguise. Even if a real Marine came, it would be difficult to see through it. Don't let me down." Jin nodded and remained silent. Nightfall. The wind and waves gradually rose in the bay. Everyone had already dispersed, but Jin was still sitting on the deck, staring blankly at the sea in the distance. A few days later, a warship slowly sailed into Raven Harbor. The hull was damaged, so the specific model could not be seen. Clearly, the Marine emblem on the sail was also in tatters, and even the outer armor of the warship had several obvious marks of shelling. It was obvious that the warship had just experienced a brutal battle. Under the guidance of port workers, the warship slowly docked at the edge of the dock, then the gangway was lowered. Gawain, dressed in a lieutenant uniform, walked down from the warship with his head held high and his chest puffed out. He looked handsome, and anyone who saw him would exclaim in admiration, "What a brave and extraordinary young Marine." The port guards, who were originally on high alert, immediately let down their guard when they saw Gawain's appearance. After all, the pirates these days all look either ugly or grotesque, and those with Gawain's appearance are just short of having the word honest written all over their faces. "Hello, I'm the person in charge here, Gaza, how can I help you?" Accompanied by a pleasant voice, a woman named Gaza walked out from the crowd surrounded by guards. She was in her early 20s, dressed elegantly and with light makeup on her face. Her facial features were not pretty, but among the half-naked commoners, she was as beautiful as a lotus emerging from water. Gawain followed his memory, placed his palm on his chest, saluted like a knight, and said in a gentle tone, "Hello, miss, I'm Lieutenant Gawain. We have just experienced a bloody battle with Black Cat pirates at the sea. Now, we need to replenish food and medicine. Otherwise, my warships will not be able to reach the nearest Marine branch. Please give me some convenience." Gaza looked at Gawain's salute, and a blush appeared on her face. She was originally a noble, so she naturally knew that Gunxing was practicing the most orthodox knight etiquette, the kind that required swearing an oath to the royal family to be qualified to learn. Born as a knight and became a Marine, Gawain's upright character was established right away. "No problem, you are free to." Before Gaza could finish her words, a whistle sounded again in the distance. Everyone looked up. They saw another warship slowly entering the port. The formal numbering, complete flags, and the Marines standing on the warship made everyone present a little confused for a moment. 2 warships visiting at the same time in one day? This has never happened before. Don't the Marines always communicate in advance? Could it be that some people are fake? It's not impossible. It was reported in the newspapers before. Pirates disguised themselves as Marines officers and sneaked into the port, then attacked the enemy by surprise. Several towns in the East Blue were destroyed because of this. So who is real and who is fake? As they spoke, the people around them quietly distanced themselves from Gawain. What to do? Kuro listened to the discussions of the people around him, his heart tightened, and he whispered in Gawain's ear. Without waiting for Gawain to speak, he reached into his arms, put on the cat claws hidden in his cloak, and was ready to take action. They are not Marine personnel at all but imposters wearing Marine uniforms. If they confront the real Marines personnel, they will be exposed in just a few words. By then, even if he didn't want to do it, he would be forced to take action. Once a war breaks out here, it will not only mean failure this time but also that this supply point will never be accessible again. You have to know that every supply point is of vital importance to the pirate group, and it can even be said to be a matter of life and death. Don't be impulsive. Gawain lowered his voice, but his eyes were fixed on the figure on the deck. Striped headscarf, heavy eye bags, overly thin body. He always felt that he had seen this person somewhere, but he couldn't remember where he was for a moment. Just when Gawain was at a loss, another familiar figure walked out of the cabin. The man was burly, with heavy shields attached to the joints of his limbs and a huge shield on his chest that looked like an inverted turtle shell. Pearl the Iron Wall? Then he is. Gawain looked up at the skinny figure, gradually associating this person with the image in his memory, and a smile slowly formed at the corner of his mouth. Everyone is fake? On the deck of the warship, Jin looked at the other warship anchored in the harbor with a confused expression. He never expected to encounter the Marines in such a situation. But, judging from the extent of damage to the enemy's warships, it was obvious that they had just experienced a major battle, and there was nothing to be afraid of. After Jin ordered his men to lower the gangway, he slowly walked down the warship with Pearl and the people on the ship who were disguised as Marines. I'm a Marine from the 18th branch, Kin, and this is my subordinate, Palu. We have just experienced a battle with Black Cat pirates in the sea. Now we need to replenish food and medicine, otherwise, my warship will not be able to reach the nearest Marine branch. Please give me some convenience. The port fell silent for a moment. Gaza looked at Jin, who was as skinny as a ghost, then looked at Gawain, who had a righteous face, and quietly took a few steps towards Gawain. The guards raised their weapons with alert faces, pointing the black muzzles of their guns at Jin and others. Looking at this scene now, no matter how you look at it, Gawain looks more like someone who has experienced a great war. After all, the dense traces of bombardment on the warship cannot be faked at all. Then, using the same reason, Jin, who came here, seemed suspicious no matter how you looked at it. Kuro, who was standing next to Gawain, looked at Gawain, then looked at Jin opposite him, who had a weak expression on his face, and his eyelids twitched. No, so I'm the one who always gets beaten? Why? At this moment, Kuro had an inexplicable illusion that if he stayed with Gawain, he would live a few years less, even if he didn't fight. What do you mean? Jin frowned slightly, his face remained calm, but his heart was already extremely alert. Seen through? Who leaked the information? These Marines? Jin looked at the crowd in the distance. Gawain, who looked so righteous and calm, almost blinded his eyes. He subconsciously praised him in his heart. What a brave and extraordinary young Marine. Chapter 20. I, Kuro, am a great actor. It's a pity that the enemy's hero is my enemy. Jin had no expression on his face. After looking around, he looked coldly at Gaza. Do you know what you are doing? If you draw your gun on the Marines, even if you are a noble of the kingdom, I have the right to execute you on the spot. As he spoke, an invisible murderous aura erupted from him, even to the point where it was visible to the naked eye. The guards in the port felt an inexplicable chill rising from the soles of their feet to the top of their heads. Their hands holding the guns were shaking visibly as if the person being pointed at by the gun was not a human being but some kind of beast with human skin. Gaza felt the murderous aura coming from Jin, and goosebumps visibly appeared on her arms. Her fingers under her sleeves were trembling. But as the lord of the port, she still mustered up the courage to face Jin's cold eyes. That's a coincidence. The man next to me, a Marine lieutenant, also had a fierce battle with Black Cat pirates at the sea. Gaza was extremely alert. Especially to Jin in front of her. Pirates disguising themselves as Marines and sneaking into ports to launch attacks happen from time to time in the East Blue. Even the great pirate Krieg, nicknamed the Admiral, used this method to attack several ports in the East Blue. She gave a subtle look to the guard beside her. The latter understood instantly. He turned around and began to organize the guards patrolling the port, evacuate the people who were still in the port and set up a defense line. It seems like they are ready for battle. This. Jin's mouth twitched. He turned to look at the badly damaged warship anchored in the harbor and then looked at Gawain, who had a righteous look on his face. For a moment, it felt like tens of thousands of alpacas were flying over his head. No, I can crash my car just by making up a random excuse? Can it be any more outrageous? But, remembering what Krieg said before leaving, Jin quickly calmed down. He had followed Krieg for several years and was naturally familiar with his style of doing things. It might be an exaggeration to say that it was flawless, but he would definitely not lag behind in such matters. Then Jin suppressed his murderous aura and said, I am under the command of the 18th Branch Base Commander, Captain Baxter. You can check it with the nearby bases. But you. He looked at Gawain with cold eyes. I have never seen you before. Please tell me the number of your warship and the branch you belong to. Otherwise, I will kill you on the spot for impersonating a Marine officer. Speaking of it, Jin took out a tonfa stick with iron balls at both ends from his waist, held it in his hand, and slowly rotated it. As the iron ball spun faster and faster, Kuro's expression became more gloomy. Clang. The cat claws hidden in his arms were unsheathed and it flashed with a cold light in the air. The strangely shaped weapon instantly attracted the attention of everyone present. Even Jin held his breath when he saw Kuro's weapon. Hey, this feeling is not good. Pearl's forehead was already covered with sweat, and he subconsciously raised his hands to protect himself with a shield, except for the captain. This is the first time I have felt such a terrible murderous aura from the enemy. This guy is definitely not a Marine. Jin did not comment on this and looked at Kuro with a serious expression. So you guys are really fake? In the end, I still have to rely on. Kuro was halfway through his words when Gawain grabbed him. He turned his head with a puzzled look on his face, only to see Gawain looking at Gaza with an apologetic look and slowly saying, Sorry, ma'am, Locke cannot tolerate any possible threats. His family all died at the hands of pirates when he was young, which led to his extreme personality. After a moment of surprise, Kuro realized that Gawain had a backup plan. He took advantage of the situation to put away his murderous intent, put his cat claws away, and said in a shameful and angry tone, You're too talkative. Gawain smiled gently, showing an expression of being used to it, but secretly gave Kuro a thumbs up in his heart. How could he have hidden in Kaya's house for 3 years without revealing any flaws? He got into the role in a second without a script and was killing it. After watching Kuro's performance, they all need to be retrained. It's okay, it's not his fault. Gaza, who was standing by, saw Kuro's performance, and tears welled up in her eyes. She was obviously very moved. Gawain turned to look at Jin, frowning slightly. We are affiliated with the G5 base, and our immediate superior is Vice Admiral Virgo. G5? Vice Admiral? Jin was slightly stunned. He had never heard of the name of this branch. It was obviously not in the East Blue. G5 was obviously an abbreviation, so it could only refer to one place. Grand Line. Vice Admiral. When these two keywords were linked together, Gawain no longer needed to say anything more. The people at the scene instantly knew its value. Jin looked even more solemn and hesitant. Should he continue to dwell on this issue, or should he eliminate the opponent here to facilitate subsequent plans? Who knew that Gawain's next words would instantly make him break out in a cold sweat? I haven't seen you in the East Blue, but I have seen a face similar to yours on a wanted poster. The bounty is 11 million Peli, Jin the man demon. Whoosh! Jin suddenly attacked, and the high-speed spinning iron ball left an afterimage in the air and directly smashed at Gawain's head. Whoosh! Kuro arrived first after launching a move, and the cat claws in his hand steadily caught Jin's attack. Then he looked at Jin with contempt. That guy may be a bastard, but you can't mess with him. Besides, you are so eager to kill him. Are you really a pirate? Jin's expression looked extremely ugly. Now that his identity had been discovered, it was obviously no longer possible to sneak into Raven Harbor and try to collude with the enemy from the inside. The only option was to storm in. Just feeling the terrifying aura coming from Kuro, Jin felt completely unsure. This man named Locke is only stronger than Krieg, and Gawain, who is standing far away and protecting Gaza behind him with a calm face, is even more unfathomable. After all, someone as powerful as Locke is just his subordinate. For a moment, Jin was caught in a dilemma. His identity was about to be exposed, and he could not win the battle. Krieg's fleet was dozens of nautical miles away. It took them time to arrive. At that time, the men under his command would probably have been killed long ago. Pearl also saw this. He held up his shield and stood in front of everyone, asking, what to do. The guards in the port also gathered at his moment, with dozens of flintlock rifles pointed at Jin and others at the same time. But at this moment, A whistle sounded again from the distant sea. Everyone inexplicably had a bad feeling in their hearts. Looking back, they saw another warship cutting through the sea and slowly sailing into the port. The guards, with confused faces, turned to look at Gaza, and when the latter nodded, they stepped forward to assist the new warship into the port. Soon, a Marine officer who looked like a mouse walked slowly down the gangway with a group of Marines. He swept his eyes over the people present and saw that the two parties in the confrontation, Gawain and Jin, had lower ranks than him. He raised his chin and said to Gaza in the distance, "I just experienced a battle at sea, and now I need to replenish food and medicine. Otherwise, my warship will not be able to reach the nearest Marine branch. Please fully cooperate with us." Chapter 21, A world where only Kuro was hurt. The harbor became quiet in an instant. Everyone looked at the new Marine expressionlessly, and for a moment, they didn't know what to say. Even Kuro and Jin, who were in a confrontation, looked at each other and tacitly put away their weapons. Gaza looked at Gawain, then looked at Jin, and then asked with a strange look on her face, Your opponent is Black Cat Pirates, right?" Nezumi was slightly stunned. Thinking of the little pirate whose bounty on his ship was less than 5 million, he looked at Kuro and Jin, who looked frighteningly strong in the distance. In the spirit of not losing the battle and not letting others look down on him, the Nezumi puffed out his chest and said, "Yes, it was Black Cat Pirates and their captain, Kuro of 100 Plans, who had a bounty of 14 million. I fought him in a bloody battle and defeated him, causing him to flee without any armor or weapons." Next to Gawain, Kuro, who was removing the cat claws slowly, suddenly paused and almost broke his teeth on the spot. If it weren't for the overall situation, he really wanted to rush forward and kill these three bastards slowly. "Does anyone really want to come and go to bully me?" Gawain noticed Kuro's resentful look, and it took him a lot of effort not to laugh out loud. The subordinates behind him were trembling visibly. If there were no one else present, some of them would have fainted from laughing. "Sir, please change your explanation next time." Kuro gritted his teeth. Gaza looked at the arrogant and domineering Marine in front of her, and her face turned cold. If Jin's appearance is just sickly and murderous, making him appear like a cold-blooded killer, then this new Marine has treachery and meanness written all over his face. Then, my dear Marine officer, please recognize who is ours and who is not. Otherwise, I can't let you inside the harbor. After all, I need to be responsible for the civilians living in the harbor. No one can guarantee that you are not a pirate in disguise. Nezumi was slightly startled, then became furious and said, "I am the base commander of the 16th branch base, Nezumi. Do you know the price of offending me? Damn, bastard." Gaza's expression grew even colder. Nezumi's attitude made her more certain that the other party was not a good person. Even if he was really a Marine, he was the kind of Marine who colluded with pirates and oppressed civilians. Besides, she had no good feelings towards the East Blue Marines. More than a decade ago, the Marines collected taxes from people living near Raven Harbor, saying that it wanted to build a branch base, maintain surrounding commercial routes, and protect local people. As a result, there has been no sign of the base until today. Gaza realized later that this was just a means for those people to make money. Thinking of this, Gaza looked at Nezumi coldly. "Please leave, sir." Nezumi shouted angrily, "How dare you disobey the Marine?" As soon as Nezumi's voice fell, there was a swish sound, and a row of black gun muzzles were pointed at him at the same time. Nezumi instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Unlike other Marine officers who were promoted based on their military achievements, Nezumi was able to get to his current position thanks to his ability to write good harbors and flatter his superiors. Even those under his command were basically of the same kind as him, and they did not dare to act rashly for a while. After all, if they really go into battle with these guards who look tough, they will probably lose more than we win. Don't be impulsive. Seeing that a war was about to begin, Nezumi immediately panicked. He raised his hand to ask the people behind him to put down their guns and then looked at Jin and Gawain, who were standing opposite each other in the distance. He was filled with resentment, and his tone became much harsher. "Which branch are you from?" Jin glanced at him and said, "I am affiliated with Captain Baxter of the 18th branch. You should be very familiar with him, sir. While these people claim to be from the G5 branch and are affiliated with Vice Admiral Virgo. Are you kidding me? G5 is located in the Grand Line, or even in the New World, the second half of the Grand Line. How could the people there possibly?" As Nezumi spoke, his voice gradually became quieter because when he saw Gawain's face clearly, he felt cold all over. Not long ago, he had seen this face at a meeting while discussing the other party's bounty. Finally, Lieutenant Commander Branyu from the headquarters gave an exaggerated number, 48 million belly. It directly refreshed the upper limit of the bounty for pirates in the East Blue. In most cases, the bounty for pirates is linked to their strength. A pirate with a bounty of nearly 50 million can kill everyone present, even if he is alone. For a while, Nezumi was so frightened that he couldn't speak clearly, and his tongue was not working properly. You are a pirate in disguise. Pearl spoke first. I was wondering how it is possible that there are Marines from the Grand Line headed towards the East Blue. And how is it possible that those bigwigs are willing to come here? Is this a revelation? When Pearl's voice fell, Gaza turned to look at Gawain with a hint of vigilance in her eyes. She is a nymphomaniac, but she is not stupid. She can even be said to be very smart, otherwise, she would not have obtained such a large territory at this age. Everyone's guns were instantly pointed at Gawain and Kuro. Jin, who was about to be exposed, had his palms wet with sweat just now. Fortunately, as long as he passes this level, the subsequent arrangements will be much easier. But, another worry also arose in his heart. If the other party is really desperate, it will be a question of whether they can survive the attack of these two people, even if he adds the guards in the harbor and other Marines at the side. As expected, as the situation on the scene took a sharp turn, Kuro once again wore his cat claws, and a vague murderous intent spread throughout his body. He bowed slightly, ready to strike with pussyfoot maneuver as soon as Gawain gave the order. This time, Gawain did not stop him but just looked at everyone with an indifferent expression. If he had a choice, he certainly didn't want to take action here. After all, with the level of development of Raven Harbor, as long as stable channels are established internally, it can be said that their ship will not lack weapons, food, or even medical supplies for a long time in the future. Well. A sigh reached everyone's ears, and Gawain quietly tightened the grip on the sword in his hand, instantly emitting a strong sense of oppression. At this moment, even Kuro, who was standing behind him, Jin and Pearl at the side, lost their sense of existence. In everyone's sight, there was only Gawain. Hey. Is this real or fake? Jin swallowed his saliva and clenched the iron crutch in his hand. He felt that Gawain in front of him was like a ferocious beast that had awakened. He exudes the aura of a predator, and in his eyes, he's prey. No matter how big the gap is, there must be a limit. But at this moment, a harsh voice broke the atmosphere. Chapter 22, We Are All Real Bang. Nezumi slapped Pearl in the face and then turned to look at Gawain in a flattering manner. I just remembered it wrong. It's not uncommon for the Marines to return to East Blue from the Grand Line. For example, Vice Admiral Garp often returns here. From what I see of you. From your appearance, you don't look like a pirate. Yeah? Gawain slowly put away his sword with an indifferent expression. Looking at Nezumi's reaction, he knew that Nezumi had seen through his identity. Judging from his attitude, he probably doesn't want to start a fight with him here. After all, even a fellow like Arlong could easily defeat him, not to mention Gawain, whose bounty was more than twice that of Arlong and whose combat power was far superior to that of Arlong. Then it seems that this matter is a misunderstanding. Nezumi nodded vigorously. The moment he recognized Gawain's face, he was almost frightened to death, so this was, of course, a misunderstanding, and it could only be a misunderstanding. As a senior member of the East Blue Marines, he was very familiar with what a bounty of 48 million meant. He is a tough guy that only a rear admiral from the headquarters can deal with. In the East Blue, he can almost be said to be invincible. If things really develop to the point where Gawain has to take action, everyone present will die. At this moment, even the man named Locke, who was standing next to Gawain, looked familiar to him. 10-finger claw knives, a cold and gloomy face, and a terrifying murderous aura emanating from his whole body. Locke. Kuro? He is Kuro? Nezumi's heart skipped a beat. His fighting style was the same as in the rumors. There was no doubt about it. He was the real Kuro of 100 Plans. Thinking back to what he had just said, Nezumi suddenly wished he could find a place to hide. So unlucky. I just said some nonsense and boasted, but is the actual person actually here? At this moment, Kuro's gaze accidentally swept over Nezumi, and feeling the coldness in the other party's eyes, Nezumi felt a chill on his back. He decided that he couldn't stay in this broken place anymore. Thinking of this, Nezumi was about to speak to try to get away with it, but he felt a gust of hot air coming from beside him. At this moment, Pearl trembled all over as he felt a burning pain on his face, then he reached out and touched his nose, only to see a drop of blood. Blood? Am I bleeding? Pearl's face turned pale, and an invisible flame burst out from under the armor around him. The flame was bluish-green in color, and it was obvious that its temperature was much higher than that of ordinary flames. Even though they were far away, everyone felt as if the flame was licking their skin. Oh no! Jin's face darkened. Among Krieg's men, Pearl's fighting power is second only to himself. With the shields all over his body, he may not be repelled even if bombarded head-on with artillery shells. But Pearl had a fatal flaw. Once injured, he will lose his mind and go berserk on the spot. It's going to be bad. Fire Pearl's special treat. Flames exploded around Pearl, and his face looked almost insane. The pain on his face made him lose his mind and go out of control. Without any explanation, he swung the shield on his arm and smashed it towards Nezumi. Help! Help! Nezumi squeezed out a sound from his throat and then saw a skinny figure suddenly appear in front of him. The man swung the crutch in his hand horizontally, using the huge force of inertia to hit the shield in front of Pearl's chest. Bang! The shield on Pearl's chest was smashed apart, and he flew backward. After landing, he rolled a few times and lost consciousness. The harbor guards looked at Jin, who had suddenly attacked with expressions of fear. They subconsciously protected Gaza and took a few steps back. At the same time, the eyes they looked at Jin changed to great fear. In their eyes, someone who could smash such a heavy shield with one blow was no different from a monster. Nezumi, who managed to survive, had his crotch wet. Alive. Alive. Be my subordinate. If you do a good job, I'll give you money and help you get promoted. No, I'll transfer you to my team instead. Nezumi spoke incoherently. Jin smelled a strange smell in the air and frowned. Sir, we still need you to prove our identities. Oh, yes, identity. Nezumi ignored the strange feeling coming from his lower body. He gave Gawain a flattering smile and looked at Gaza. I can vouch for it. Both of them are real Marines. Gaza looked at Nezumi, then looked at Jin standing next to her with a frown and said, Now, none of you three can be trusted. Nezumi blushed but did not dare to get angry because Gawain was present. He could only take out a den mushi from his arms with a gloomy face and dial it. After speaking a few words to the person on the other end of the line, he asked his subordinates to hand the receiver to Gaza. Father? Gaza was slightly stunned. Captain Nezumi is an old acquaintance of yours? Gaza glanced at Nezumi with a strange expression, with a hint of disgust in her eyes, and lowered her voice and said, This guy is a bad person. He is colluding with the local pirates in Kokoyasi village? Damn it. Okay, I understand. After hanging it up, Gaza returned the den mushi to Nezumi and said to everyone with a hint of apology, Since this is a misunderstanding, let's just leave it at that. I apologize for my previous behavior, but this is my responsibility as the Lord. Please understand. Then Gaza waved her hand and asked the guards in the harbor to disperse. After looking at Gawain deeply, she turned and left. The three parties confronting each other in the harbor couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. None of them wanted to go to war directly, so the current outcome was almost the best solution at the moment. As the tense situation eased, the three parties began to carry out their respective actions. Nezumi looked at Gawain from a distance and shuddered subconsciously. Then he said to the Marine beside him, Leave. We'll leave right away. The Marine was stunned, looking a little embarrassed. Captain, the supplies on the ship can only last for a few days, and it will take at least half a month to reach the next harbor. If we continue to stay here, we will all die. Nezumi's voice was trembling. After calming down, he said, Contact the nearby base and tell them that our ship has had problems at sea and ask them to come and pick us up. As for these monsters. Nezumi looked at Jin in the distance, then looked at Gawain and Kuro, and said through gritted teeth, Just leave them be. It just so happens that Logue Town is not far from here. Isn't that bastard from the headquarters very arrogant? Then let him solve it. After saying that, Nezumi didn't even bother to replenish supplies. As soon as the crowd dispersed, he sailed away directly, giving a feeling of fleeing in desperation. In the harbor, Kuro looked at the warship that Jin and the others were on and licked his lips. I know that person. He is not very powerful and poses no threat. But the Marine named Kin, who attacked just now, is quite powerful. Even I feel a little threatened by him. He is considered a top figure in the East Blue. His name is not Kin. Gawain shook his head and directly pointed out the other party's identity, Jin the Man Demon, a bounty of 11 million Peli, number 1 cadre on Admiral Krieg's ship. Chapter 23, Admiral Krieg's men? Kuro nodded and said, No wonder. Disguising as a Marine to sneak into the harbor and launch an attack from both inside and outside is that guy's specialty. Do you want to do it? Gawain shook his head. Less trouble is worse than more trouble. That guy's strength is average, but he has a huge fleet of thousands of people. If dozens of ships attack together, it will not be difficult for the two of us to take it down by force, but most of the people on the ship will be lost. It's not worth it. Hurry up, we'll leave after we've replenished our supplies. Okay. Kuro responded. Gawain turned to look at Jin, who was still standing on the deck. After they looked at each other, Jin turned and walked towards the cabin. Gawain quietly activated the badge function and sent a detection. Name, Jin, potential, bronze, rating, iron. I will repay a favor and be extremely loyal. Although he has average talent, there is no boss who doesn't like such employees. I will repay a favor and be extremely loyal. Gawain looked at the keywords on the panel and immediately became interested. He has bronze level potential, which is almost the same as Kuro. It is also a good experience pack. If I have the chance in the future, I will definitely take him in. But now I still have to take care of the supply issue first. After closing the system interface, Gawain left most of the men on the ship to guard against possible accidents and then followed Kuro to find Drew, the contact person Kuro had agreed to meet. On the other side, when Jin returned to the boat, Pearl had woken up from his coma. Looking at the broken shield and the silent Jin, Pearl instantly realized what had happened and said apologetically, "Jin, I'm sorry. It's meaningless to talk about this now. Stay on the boat and recover. Leave the rest to me." Jin patted Pearl's shoulder, but his mind kept thinking about Nezumi's unusual reaction just now, and he had a vague guess in his heart. He then took out the Den Mushi and dialed a number. Soon, a deep voice came from the other end of the Den Mushi. "Jin? Nailed it?" "No." Jin shook his head, his tone solemn. "Besides us, there are 2 groups of Marines who came here. One of them is Captain Nezumi, but he has already left and is not a big threat. The real trouble is the other group of people. The other party was able to scare Nezumi into incoherent speech before he even made a move. Either he's a powerful pirate or a monster from the Grand Line. Even judging from their aura, the 2 leaders on the other side are stronger than me. Captain, how about we postpone this operation and wait for the next opportunity?" Jin asked tentatively. "Next time?" There was a sneer from the other end of the phone. "Jin, do you know how much a fleet of 5,000 people costs in a month? Do you know how long the food on our ship can last? Do you know how much ammunition becomes ineffective every day due to moisture? Fighting is your job, understand?" Krieg's voice suddenly rose with unparalleled confidence. "It's not that I don't want to wait, but this road can only move forward and not backward. I own such a huge fleet just to make sure that my voice is the only one on this ocean. Dozens of pirate ships can destroy a town with just one salvo. What is the point of individual strength in the face of such a mighty force? Besides, the cannons have already been ready. I don't think anyone can be stronger than me." "I see." Jin nodded. He would never disobey Krieg's orders, even if that meant certain death. Besides, he agreed with Krieg's words from the bottom of his heart. In this vast ocean, individual strength has its limits, after all. Mortal flesh cannot withstand swords and bullets, let alone powerful cannons. After hanging up the Den Mushi, Jin's eyes gradually became sharper. After counting the people on the boat, he quickly took action and began to explore the large and small troop deployment points and ammunition storage places in the city. Then, he quietly deployed the ship's key forces at these locations. At that time, only one order would be needed to directly disintegrate the resistance in the harbor, and even the entire harbor could be easily controlled without any hindrance. He has done this countless times and has never failed. The results prove Krieg's unique strategic vision. This time, we won't be wrong, even if there are other factors. Jin calmed down and even led the team himself to investigate the movements of Gawain and others. At the other end of the Den Mushi, Krieg looked at the information sent back from the harbor and frowned slightly. 2 slightly worn bounty warrants were placed on his desk. "Captain, based on the information sent back by Jin-sama, we can basically confirm that the other force in the harbor is these 2 people. White Knight Gawain, a bounty of 8 million belly. Kuro of 100 plans, bounty of 14 million belly." The assistant standing next to Krieg presented the information he had sorted out and added, "But we don't have the updated bounty on the ship, and this information may be out of date." Krieg nodded. "The bounty on pirates won't change much in a few months. It's not a big problem. Besides, this Gawain only became famous in the past 2 years, and this Kuro is rumored to have already considered retiring." "Oh." Krieg sneered. For a pirate, having such thoughts means he is not far from death. However, by entering the harbor disguised as the Marines, they probably also want to control Raven Harbor from the inside. It will be troublesome if they succeed in advance. It's better to strike first. Let's just do it." The assistant was stunned, but Jin-sama and Pearl-sama are still in the harbor. Isn't this a bit? A sinister smile appeared on Krieg's lips. In his eyes, the so-called subordinates are nothing more than consumables. Anyone can be sacrificed as long as the plan can be completed, including Jin, the second in command on the ship. "No problem. I believe that with their strength, they will be able to survive the attack. If they don't survive, it only means that they are nothing special. Such crew members cannot become my right-hand men." The assistant swallowed his saliva, his eyes filled with fear. He didn't know when he would be ruthlessly abandoned by Krieg like Jin, maybe a long time later or maybe in the next second. But the more he thought about it, the more he wanted to prove his own worth and the less he dared to disobey Krieg's will. The assistant was in a state of panic. Krieg had already turned around, raised his hand, and gently stroked the golden armor placed beside him with an expression of intoxication on his face. This armor made of a special alloy is strong enough to withstand close-range attacks from warships and cannons. Even the strongest swordsman cannot cut it off. Not to mention that under every piece of armor, there is a deadly weapon. Armor-piercing bullets, high-explosive bombs, poison gas bombs, each of which can easily take a person's life. Not to mention I still have this. Krieg held a spear with one hand. The spear had an exaggerated shape and weighed more than a ton. Feeling the power in it, a strong sense of self-confidence burst out in his eyes. The stronger the impact, the stronger the explosion will be. Just relying on this armor, I should have a place even on the Grand Line, let alone a small East Blue. Who can stop me? Chapter 24, The right way to bargain. Outside the harbor, low huts, smelly sewage, and people coming and going in untidy clothes, with fierce faces or half-naked clothes, are typical pictures of civilian areas. It is in stark contrast to the clean and tidy streets in the harbor. The assistant assigned by Gaza stood at the entrance of the civilian area and said to Gawain with a slightly apologetic tone, "Sir, most arms trades are conducted on the black market, which is full of mixed people. Even if the Lord wants to intervene, we are powerless. Besides, ruling a harbor is far from as easy as imagined. It is normal to catch the big ones and let the small ones go. Therefore, as long as there is no big chaos, we usually turn a blind eye to this place. I can't go in with you, so please be careful." The assistant bowed to Gawain and was about to leave, but then Kuro suddenly asked, "Are we the only ones who have this privilege, or do they have it too?" The assistant was slightly startled, and an inexplicable smile appeared on her face. "Please don't misunderstand me. The Lord's original words were, compared to that group of people, you guys are more like real Marines no matter how you look at it." After saying that, the assistant's gaze lingered on the two people's faces for a moment, then she smiled slightly and turned away. "What's the meaning?" Kuro was stunned. "He compliments you on your handsomeness." Gawain's lips curled up into a smile. But Kuro's face turned red slightly. After more than 10 years at sea, he had only heard people say that he looked gloomy and scary. When has he ever been praised so directly? So much so that he subconsciously muttered, "You're too talkative." The smile on Gawain's face became even wider. Food and medicine can be purchased through formal channels in the city. Although the prices are a bit expensive, the quality is good, and the delivery speed is fast, so it doesn't take long to get it done. The difficult part is guns and ammunition, so they can only find Kuro's contact person, Rue. The two walk through the route that Kuro remembered and soon arrive at a bar. The strong smell of alcohol and an unspeakable peculiar smell rushed into Gawain's nostrils, making him frown. He raised his eyes and saw Kuro walking straight into the corner and followed him. In the corner was a low door. With their height of just over 2 meters, they needed to bend down to get in. Bang! 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 Kuro knocked on the door. With a creaking sound, a slightly cunning face poked out from the house. "Yo! Isn't his Kuro? I heard that you were going to retire, so why are you back to your old job? Stop talking nonsense, Rue." Kuro's face was grim. "Flintlock ammunition, 300 sets, 100mm shells, 500 rounds, how much? Let me do the math." Rue shook his fingers, looked at Kuro, then at Gawain's face, and said a number, "A total of 30 million belly. Are you crazy?" Kuro's face was gloomy, and he shouted angrily, "Last time, all of these together were less than 10 million. How can it triple? Aren't you afraid that you'll get them but not be able to spend them? You have to understand me." Rue spread his hands, showing an expression that he had already defeated Kuro, and said, "I spent a lot of money to get myself out of the hands of the Marines. Now I'm in debt. Besides, the arms trade means people will die. Is it appropriate for you to bargain with a dead person?" As Rue spoke, everyone in the bar gathered around him in an instant. Under the lights, the sharp blades reflected cold light, and it was obvious that they were prepared for the situation before them. Kuro gritted his teeth. He didn't want to start a conflict here, so he raised his hand and made a 2 sign, 20 million. 20 million at most. That is far from enough. Rue smiled slightly, and just as he was about to speak, a cold voice came from his ear, "Kuro, that's not how you bargain." Gawain glanced around and slowly drew the sword from his waist. He was filled with a murderous aura. The oppressive feeling he exuded made nearly 100 people in the bar dare not take a step forward. Rue's forehead was covered with sweat, and he looked at Kuro in surprise. Hey, where did you find these subordinates, Kuro? They're more oppressive than you." "Subordinates?" Kuro looked at Rue, a grim smile on his face. "He's my captain. Does he think his life is too long to have a subordinate like you?" Rue retorted. "Hey, he's different, strong like a monster." Kuro refused to give in, but Gawain had lost his patience and looked at Rue coldly. 10 million. Ru's vest was soaked with sweat, but he still endured the pressure and gritted his teeth and said, 20 million. The next moment, silver light flashed in the bar, and every time it appeared, there was a scream around, and Anir fell from midair to the ground, separated from its owner's body. Gawain was like the god of death, wandering among the crowd as he cut off the crowd's ear with every swing. Everyone panicked instantly and held their weapons tightly, but they could not feel safe at all and could only wait silently for the arrival of death. 8 million. Gawain's voice reached Ru's ears again, but it only made him tremble all over. He kept calling him a lunatic and no longer had the arrogant attitude of being sure of victory and having the upper hand. How could he not understand? Gawain shows that by cutting these people's ears, he could easily take all of these people's lives. Kuro wasn't lying, this really is a monster. No, how can it still descend? 8 million. Just 8 million. Ru quickly interrupted Gawain, his voice trembling. If Gawain continued to cut the price, he would lose everything on this order. I said, 6 million. Gawain appeared, looking down at Ru from above, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ru opened his mouth, but all he could see were his subordinates covering their ears, trembling in pain but not daring to scream. 6 million, then it's 6 million. Now he just wants to get rid of this plague god as soon as possible. It doesn't matter, even if he loses money. If he continues to chop down, all these subordinates who were gathered with great difficulty will probably run away. The ending for a lone man here will not be very good. Don't play tricks. If my captain gets angry, I can't stop him. Kuro reached out and patted Ru's face. Seeing that the latter didn't dare to resist at all, he couldn't suppress his smile. Gawain looked at the broken sword in his hand and frowned slightly. This sword, which had accompanied the original owner for several years, was covered with notches on the blade and even had several obvious cracks on the spine of the sword. Most of these cracks were left from the previous fight with Kuro, but Kuro's cat claws were still as shiny as new. It was obvious that the quality of the two was not at the same level at all. It's time to change weapons. A few hours later, the sun gradually sets in the sky, and the afterglow dyes the sky red. A group of people dressed as Marines entered the civilian area and carried away boxes of ammunition wrapped in wax paper. Kuro then checked it and confirmed the quality, then nodded to Gawain, "No problem, everything works fine." Gawain responded and turned to look at the sea in the distance. The wind was light, and the waves were calm, and a few seabirds flew over the water. He felt a little uneasy for no reason, then turned to Kuro and said, "Take these supplies and weapons aboard. I'll go and warn that woman. If it's true, as I speculated, once Krieg's men attack, this harbor will be destroyed." Kuro was stunned. "Is it necessary?" Gawain showed a smile. "Someone praised you for being handsome this afternoon." Boring. Chapter 25, Guan's Masamune Raven Harbor. Lord's Mansion. Gaza was sitting in the office on the top floor, and the assistant beside her was reporting to her the movements of the two groups of people after they entered the harbor. There was nothing unusual about the Marines that Gawain was in. They first purchased a large amount of food and fresh water. It was also reasonable for them to purchase arms on the black market. After all, it was much cheaper than regular channels. Gaza nodded but repeated the name she had just heard. "Gawain, I feel like I've heard this name somewhere before, maybe I remembered it wrongly. What about the other one?" "Very strange." The assistant frowned and took out a stack of organized documents, which clearly marked the movements of Jin and his group, and then pointed out several locations. "These are where we store our ammunition." After they entered the harbor, they did not go looking for supplies. Instead, it seemed like. Suddenly, a gentle voice came from outside the window. "Scout your deployment map." Without waiting for the two to react, Gawain pushed open the window, squatted on the windowsill, and looked at the two indifferently. "You are Lieutenant Gawain?" The assistant immediately stood in front of Gaza and looked at Gawain with a wary look on her face. Just as she was about to ask the guard to come in, she felt a soft hand on her shoulder. "Jasmine, don't be impulsive, he means no harm." After stopping the waitress Jasmine's actions, Gaza turned her head and looked at Gawain, finally remembering where she had heard this name. "Lieutenant Gawain, no, it should be White Knight Gawain. One of the parties involved in the incident that caused a stir in the East Blue 3 years ago. As the Knight Commander of the Kingdom of Goa, you committed adultery with the princess. After being discovered, you abandoned your knighthood and became a pirate active in the East Blue. White Knight Gawain, with a bounty of 8 million belly. I was so confused that I forgot about you." Gaza shook her head but didn't notice Jasmine's trembling eyes beside her. She couldn't help but smile. "Did you know? Your story has been adapted into a theater and is being shown in the Kingdom of Goa." Gawain stumbled and almost lost his balance. After greeting his predecessor again in his heart, he changed the subject without blushing. "I am here to warn you that the other Marines are also disguised as pirates. The one who calls himself Kin is actually Admiral Krieg's subordinate, Jinnah Man Demon, with a bounty of 11 million belly. I'm afraid this time they have the same idea as before. Disguise as Marines, sneak into the harbor, cooperate with the outside, and take control of Raven Harbor at the lowest cost. Gaza frowned slightly upon hearing this. Combined with the assistant's analysis, she was basically sure that Gawain was telling the truth, but she was still a little confused. Why are you helping me? Maybe it's because you said I'm handsome. Gaza burst out laughing. What kind of reason is that? But that's the freedom of pirates. Under the red afterglow of the setting sun, Gawain leaned against the window with a faint smile on his lips. His whole body seemed to be glowing. Gaza, who was watching from inside the house, was stunned for a moment. Bye. Gawain waved his hand and was about to turn around and leave. Whoosh! 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 There was a sharp sound that broke through the air, and a red meteor came from the distance and fell into the harbor, causing a violent explosion. Fire filled the sky, and the harbor was instantly in chaos. A cannonball came straight towards where Gawain was. Oh, it looks like I can't leave yet. Gawain's voice sounded a little helpless, but the sword at his waist did not slow down at all. However, after slashing in the air, the sword shattered into pieces along the cracks on the sword's spine. Fortunately, he still cut the incoming shell apart in midair. Boom! Red flames rose outside the window. Even though they were dozens of meters apart, and the impact and high temperature were blocked by the wall, Gaza's face turned extremely pale. Growing up under the love of her parents, how could she have ever experienced such a cruel scene? But when she shifted her gaze from Gawain to the burning harbor behind him, Gaza gritted her teeth and forced herself to stand up. What followed was confusion. The opponent is Admiral Krieg, who is feared by everyone at the East Blue. He has a huge fleet consisting of dozens of pirate ships. How can the guards in the harbor alone stop him? Jasmine, who had calmed down, whispered at this moment, "My lord, only he, only Gawain, can help us. His bounty is only 8 million. How could it be possible that?" Gaza shook her head subconsciously, but she heard an unbelievable voice again. She was stunned for a moment, then showed a shocked expression. "How many?" 48 million. Jasmine repeated the number. Now, Gaza looked at Gawain as if she had seen a savior. "Mr. Gawain, please wait a moment." Gawain, who was about to leave through the window to meet up with Kiro to discuss how to break out of the encirclement, stopped and turned around to see Jasmine taking out a long, narrow stick wrapped in black cloth from a safe nearby. "This is. It was originally intended for my father's 50th birthday present, but I think it has found a better owner now." Jasmine removed the black cloth, revealing a sword in a scabbard. Even though they were several meters apart, and the sword was still in its sheath, Gawain could still feel the sharp aura emanating from the blade. Absolutely extraordinary. Then Gaza said to herself, "Guan's Masamune. One of the famous swords forged during the heyday of Wano country 100 years ago. It ranks fourth among the 21 great grade blades. It is the treasure that countless swordsmen dream of. Mr. Gawain, if you help me defeat the Krieg pirates, it will be yours." Gawain licked his lips. "Is it possible that if I kill you here, it will still be mine, right?" Gaza was stunned and then said, "Since you are willing to remind me at this time, how can a great person like you, who can see the big picture from the small details, do something like a robbery?" "Oh." Gawain smiled faintly and then shook his head. "It's not enough." Gaza gritted her teeth as if she had made some important decision and said, "Our Raven Harbor can provide you with long-term and stable logistical support in the future. Of course, this is conditional. I need you to help maintain the safety of the sea area near Raven Harbor. Expel or kill all those pirates." Gawain looked surprised. This kind of thing is usually done by the Marines, right? What kind of people are the Marines? Didn't you see it today? Gaza sneered and continued, "The location of Raven Harbor is too important, but it is also located in an extremely dangerous sea area. The Marines are unreliable, and our guards here are even less reliable. The defense line we have built on our own is too weak. It would be better for us to cooperate directly with you." What a courage! Gawain did not hide his admiration. Whether you are willing to admit it or not, the era of pirates is always the era of men. Over the past few decades, there have been countless men who have reached the top of the sea, but there has only been one woman. Even the pirate Empress Boa Hancock is inferior to her. It is extremely rare for a woman to have the decisiveness of Gaza. If she has the corresponding power, she may become a powerful figure. Deal. Chapter 26, Pearl's Death and Jin's Decision on the Sea. A whole row of pirate ships stood at a distance, with fire blooming from their ferocious gun muzzles as they shot shells like shooting stars at Raven Harbor. Boom. 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 The prosperous and bustling harbor fell into chaos in the blink of an eye. Flames rose everywhere, and screams resounded throughout the city. "Pirates! Pirates are coming! Help! The Marines are in the harbor, A glimmer of hope rose in everyone's eyes, but this glimmer of hope completely dissipated the moment they turned around and looked back at the harbor. The two warships standing in the harbor were hit before they could even escape the first round of shelling and were now engulfed in flames. Everyone on the warship was also retreating to the harbor, escape. From the moment the first scream was heard, the people in the harbor began to flee in all directions or hide under shelter. The city walls used to be so thick that they could not even be shaken, but now seemed so small in front of the steel torrent gushing in the distance and could hardly bring a sense of security. The ships remaining in the harbor had no room to escape and caught fire in just a few seconds. In the harbor, flames surged and engulfed countless ships. The high temperature licked Jin's pale face. He had just finished the arrangements in the city and had not even had time to initiate any action before Krieg's attack arrived ahead of time. Jin-sama, Pearl. Pearl-sama is still on the boat. A pirate opened his mouth, unable to believe what was happening before his eyes. He wanted to rush onto the ship to save people but was stopped by the fire. He could only listen to the painful cries of the people on the boat and could do nothing. Who did it? The Marines? No, even the most corrupt and depraved Marines would not do such a thing. The pirates who came to the harbor with us? But their ship was also attacked. The pirates looked anxious and talked a lot, but they didn't get an accurate answer. Or they all subconsciously ignored the only answer. Jin didn't. He reached up and tugged at his turban with his teeth clenched. He really couldn't understand or accept what Krieg did this time. It was absolutely wrong. Even pirates should cherish their companions. But at this moment, a tall figure, holding two pirates in his arms, rushed out of the cabin under the blazing fire and jumped into the sea. Thump. It's Pearl. He's still alive. Everyone jumped into the water and worked together to rescue Pearl, who was completely exhausted, but they all fell silent. Jin pushed away the people surrounding Pearl, but his pupils suddenly shrank the moment he saw Pearl clearly. At this moment, Pearl's appearance had changed due to the burning fire. His hair, which he had carefully groomed in the past, had now been burnt to nothing. There was not a single piece of intact skin on his body. His flesh was rolled up and gave off a disgusting burnt smell. Jin, it hurts so much. A weak voice reached Jin's ears, and he raised his hand to comfort his companion as he did before. But there was no skin left on his body that could be touched. Who hiss? Pearl was gasping for breath, he could hardly see anymore. He looked around with blurry vision, and when he found nothing, he asked about the two people he had rescued. Are they still alive? Jin turned around and looked at the two bodies that were burnt to a bloody mess and said reluctantly, they are unconscious, but they are still alive. Is that so? Pearl smiled slightly, it's a pity that I can't see it. Hey Jin, leave here, leave that man. I've seen clearly that in his eyes, there are no companions, he only sees us as tools that can be discarded at any time. This time, it was me, next time, it might be you. Jin lowered his head in silence, but he almost broke his teeth. Pearl seemed to understand something and smiled faintly, you are still so stupid. It's time to live for yourself. His voice gradually became softer, and he took his last breath with a heart full of reluctance. After a few seconds of silence, Jin slowly stood up, wiped his face with his hand, and his eyes became firm once again. The captain made a mistake. We should correct him, not betray him. Let's start now. Understood. Everyone responded in unison. Following Jin's order, the pirates who entered the harbor with him began to act quickly. They walked through the artillery fire and cleared out the resistance forces in the city according to the locations they had explored. Ammunition depots exploded one after another, and as soon as countless guards organized a rescue operation, they were faced with a head-on attack from the pirates. In just a few minutes, most of the core locations in the city were controlled by Jin, and he also turned his attention to Kuro, who had hurried here. The tronfa in his hands began to spin and gradually accelerated until they could no longer be seen with the naked eye. Under such a powerful force, even a body made of steel would be twisted and deformed if hit head-on. Almost time to start enjoying today's main course. Kuro glanced at Jin, then turned to look at his burning warship. Fortunately, he was extra careful at the time and did not suffer heavy losses like Jin, but several brothers were trapped on the ship. The wailing sound became smaller and finally stopped. At this moment, the murderous intent in Kuro reached its peak. After more than 10 years of fighting, had he ever suffered such a great loss? What's more, those on the ship are all elites trained by Gawain. They are the new blood of the pirate group and the absolute main force. Each one of them is extremely precious. How can he not feel heartbroken when he suffers such a loss? I will skin you alive first and then kill Krieg. Kuro's voice was cold and sharp as if he was stating some fact. Along with his words, the 10 sharp claw swords gleam with cold lights. Clang. And this time, no one will came to restrict Kuro's shots. Pussyfoot maneuver. The next moment, Kuro's figure disappeared in an instant, but the extremely strong murderous intent was everywhere. Whoosh! 5 scratches appear on Jin's body, from bottom to top, almost cutting his body in half on the spot. So fast. The intense pain made Jin's adrenaline surge. There was only a blurry figure in his sight. Kuro moved at irregular movement at high speed. It was so fast that it almost completely exceeded his perception. Whoosh! 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 The sound of sharp blades cutting came around Jin one after another. He saw hideous scratches appearing on the ground, walls, and even corpses left on the ground in an instant. The opponent before him was obviously the strongest one he had ever faced since he went to sea, and it could even be said that there was no one stronger. With such a fast speed, a normal person would have no way to counter it. Jin could only swing the crutch in his hand faster and use it to protect himself like a shield. Because this time, if he's not careful, he will really die. Chapter 27, Death Battle. Whoosh! 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 Barely blocking Kuro's attacks again and again, more wounds gradually appeared on Jin's body. More wounds gradually appeared on Jin's body. Blood was flowing everywhere on his body as if he was being tortured through slow slicing. Kuro's voice could still be heard from time to time around him. I will cut off all the flesh from your body piece by piece until you die from bleeding to death. In a rage, Kuro no longer had the gloomy and cold face he had before. At this moment, his face was full of ferociousness. In the increasingly bloody scene, he felt an unprecedented excitement as if his soul was trembling. At this moment, he just wanted to skin his opponent alive. Jin remained silent. As the attack became faster, he gradually realized the core problem of Kuro's move: vision is limited, and hearing is completely blocked by the sonic booms produced by high-speed movement. At such a high speed, you can't even control your body, right? The scratches everywhere are the best proof. This is an ability that attacks indiscriminately. The more he spoke, the more Jin's eyes became brighter. You are very strong, much stronger than me, but compared to Captain Krieg, no, compared to the weapons he made for killing, the gap is like that of creatures from 2 different dimensions. Kuro. You will definitely lose. We will definitely win. As he spoke, the tonfa in Jin's hand swept across and collided with Kuro's cat claws, making sparks fly in the air. You. The cat claws and the tonfa crossed each other, and the 2 men started to wrestle. Kuro was clearly in the upper hand, suppressing Jin tightly, but the shock in his eyes could not be described in words. Besides that man, is there anyone else who can crack the pussyfoot maneuver? Ah. Jin raised a sinister smile. You must be very afraid of death, right? That's why you created this move that completely suppresses the enemy in terms of speed, even at the cost of your own perception. But fighting is a matter of life and death. How can you win without gambling? Since I can't sense it, I might as well just leave everything to luck. My intuition tells me where the enemy will attack from. The next moment, Kuro's figure disappeared into the air in an instant. He pushed the speed of the pussyfoot maneuver to the limit. The leather shoes on the soles of his feet began to crumble under the strain as they were unable to endure the relentless impact due to moving at high speed. Kuro simply went barefoot in order to pursue faster speed. Faster. 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 It is so fast that it is beyond imagination, like the wind and lightning, so fast that the opponent doesn't even have time to think. As Kuro's speed increased rapidly, the speed that was already unspeakably fast was directly broken through to a whole new dimension. It was as if a wind of death was blowing around, and the claws on the 10 fingers were all red due to high speed. Then let's make a bet. What would be the results, your luck or my death? Kuro's fighting spirit grew stronger and stronger. As he moved at high speed, his back and waist were arched, like a predatory cat shrugging its shoulders, and his whole body leaned forward greatly because only in this way could he barely maintain his balance. 5 fingers are stretched out to maximize the lethality. Kuro's expression became more ferocious, but Jin's face was calm. In the blink of an eye, Jin's already bruised body was covered with countless scars, blood was splattered, and the tragic scene made people around him dare not look directly at it. It seems like your luck in gambling is not very good. Kuro's disembodied voice was heard again in the air. Here. Jin's tightly closed eyes suddenly opened at this moment, and an inexplicable feeling rose in his heart. There's no reason or even logic, but he just knows where Kuro will attack from. With an almost precognitive instinct, Jin subconsciously swung the tonfa in his hands. Then, the ball on the top of the tonfa, with a force powerful enough to split rocks, hit Kuro's chest and abdomen head-on. Boom. Kuro, who was moving at high speed, suddenly stopped and flew backward like a cannonball. He smashed through the outer wall of the harbor and was buried by falling rocks. Is it finally over? Jin was breathing heavily. When he came to his senses, and the adrenaline subsided, he felt severe pain in every part of his skin. Jin looked towards the ruins in the distance with an expression of lingering fear. Although this battle was extremely short, it was the most dangerous battle he had ever experienced in his life. Kuro was simply too fast, so fast that it was no longer within the reach of a human being. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't control this move, 10 of him wouldn't be enough to defeat him. It seems that luck is on my side this time. After saying that, Jin turned around and prepared to leave, but at this time, a harsh sound came from the ruins again. Whoosh! 5 scratch marks appeared on the rock that was pressing on Kuro's body. Kuro barely stood up, his one arm was hanging limply at his side, and waves of burning pain came from his chest. His body had reached its limit, but the look in Kuro's eyes when he looked at Jin was blindingly bright at this moment. Aren't you curious? Why can you sense my attack as if you could predict it? I originally thought it would be impossible to see something like this before entering the Grand Line. I haven't even experienced it myself, but it's definitely true. Observation hockey. I finally understand why even that monster, Gawain, would have that expression when talking about this ability. The advantage of reading your opponent's attack first is too great. Ha 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 ha. Kuro raised his hand and pushed his glasses with his palm. An almost crazy expression appeared on his face. He was obviously excited to the extreme. He didn't lie to me. He really didn't lie to me. It's just that the pressure I faced before was not great enough to stimulate the power that was always hidden in my body. But now it's different. We are equal. One arm is broken, and more than 6 ribs in my chest were broken by your attack. My internal organs are also damaged to varying degrees. Next. It's a life and death battle. I might really die, but are you ready? Monster. Jin took a deep breath, his face filled with extreme fear. Do you still want to fight? Ah. Kuro licked his lips, the fishy sweet taste covering the tip of his tongue. His severely injured body took one step at a time while shaking. Every step he took left a blood stain on the ground. Life and death? He no longer cares. A peaceful life? It doesn't seem so important at this time. It was not until this moment that he finally saw his true self and understood why he wanted to abandon his identity as a pirate. There was only one answer. Boring. This mediocre world and the weakest sea have made him lose even the slightest interest in drawing his weapon. Even those opponents who were once much stronger than him did not seem so invincible in front of his well-planned tactics. It was not until the moment he met Gawain that he felt the long-lost excitement in the fight with Gawain, so much so that his soul was trembling. I am truly a complete and hopeless villain. Only fighting, pain, and bloodshed can bring me a little comfort in this boring life. Ha ha ha. Chapter 28, Enlightenment at the Lord's Mansion. Gawain took Guan's masamune from Gaza. Although it was the first time he held the handle of the sword, the feeling from it still made him so excited that his arms couldn't help but tremble. It is a wonderful feeling of blood connection, extremely mysterious and difficult to describe in words. Clang. As Gawain exerted force with his hands, the silver-white blade slowly came out of the sheath. The length of the blade alone is over 1.2 meters, and including the handle, the overall length is about 1.5 meters. The style of Guan's masamune is obviously different from the usual sword at Wano country in Gawain's impression. There are not too many complicated sword patterns on the blade, only a chrysanthemum-shaped mark carved on the blade guard. However, the simpler the appearance, the more people can feel the sharpness of the blade. Nice sword. Gawain gave a heartfelt compliment. Jasmine beside him raised her chin slightly, revealing a look of sympathy. Of course. This is the sword that the Lord spent more than half a year of tax to obtain. Even if it is placed on the Grand Line, it is an absolute masterpiece. Snort. Gawain smiled faintly. He didn't know if it was fate or the spirit of the sword, but at this moment, he and the Guan's masamune in his hand actually felt a sense of mutual understanding. You're eager too, right? To drink the blood of my enemies. Gawain spoke in a firm tone, raised his hand, and swung the sword. Without exerting much force, he released a silver light flying slash that sank into a small building in the distance. Then, under the frightened eyes of the two girls, the upper part of the small building slowly slid down, revealing a cut as smooth as a mirror. Boom. Gawain suppressed his excitement and looked at the two girls while speaking. You guys find a place to hide first and leave the fighting to me. After saying this, Gawain disappeared from the Lord's mansion. When Gaza saw this scene, she inexplicably felt more confident. Now, she had placed all her hopes on Gawain and could only win and not lose. After sending Jasmine into the cellar, Gaza gritted her teeth and locked the cellar with her backhand. She ignored Jasmine's anxious call and walked out of the city lord's mansion with a determined look in her eyes. This is her territory, and those within it are her people. Having enjoyed power and money, she should protect the people who once respected them in times of crisis. Everyone, follow me out of the mansion and organize a rescue. Understood. After leaving the lord's mansion, Gawain accelerated all the way and headed towards the harbor, where the fighting was most intense. Visible to the naked eye, on the sea in the distance, a whole row of pirate ships armed to the teeth were gradually approaching. With Gawain's eyesight, he could even see the strangely shaped flag of the Krieg pirates. A skull and crossbones flag with hourglasses on either side. Gawain vaguely remembered that the meaning of this flag was, "No matter where you go, I will find you." A powerful enemy is at hand. Gawain, who held an authentic great-grade blade in his hand, did not feel the slightest fear in his heart. Instead, he felt a vague sense of inexplicable anxiety. He was worried that there were too few opponents and they would fall down before he could even make a move. Anxious that the enemy is too weak, the Guan's mass immune has not come out, but the enemy has already laid down, and then he has to wait for the next meal, which may come at an unknown time. You must hold on a little longer. A sinister smile appeared on Gawain's lips, but his footsteps suddenly stopped the next moment, crushing the floor beneath his feet. Just because a familiar system prompt sound appeared in Gawain's mind, Kuro realizes his true self. Potential improve, bronze, greater than silver. Awaken, observation hockey. Current level, 0, 100. This is. His potential has been broken through? He even awakened his observation hockey? Gawain looked shocked. What on earth has happened to Kuro? The sudden change is no longer a surprise but a shock. He still remembered that he had only mentioned it to Kuro at the beginning and actually had no hope for him to awaken observation hockey. But it's only been a few days? Has he already awakened the observation hockey? Awakening the observation hockey before entering the Grand Line was truly a pleasant surprise. Even though the level was not high, Gawain had the system. With every little progress Kuro made, he could gain 10 times as much. In a few months, he could reach a level sufficient for actual combat. The stronger my subordinates are, the stronger I am. When my subordinates awaken their abilities, I can also awaken them. The system's capabilities are even more exaggerated than I expected. Besides, awakening the observation hockey is only secondary. What is more important is to understand one's own nature so as to enhance one's own potential. It can even make him leap from bronze to silver level. You should know that in the systems division, silver covers the levels from commander to vice admiral rank at the Marines, as well as a small number of the 7 warlords of the sea. Such combat power would be well known even in the New World. It can be said that once Kuro fully realizes his potential, he can be regarded as a core combat force in any force. Originally, in Gawain's speculation, there were only 2 ways to improve potential, devil fruit and human body transformation, but now it might require an additional change in mentality. Gawain realized it only now. Hockey is essentially an extremely idealistic power. The stronger the belief, the stronger the hockey. Conversely, if the belief collapses, the hockey will decline to a terrifying level in a short period of time. Crocodile is the most typical example. When he was young, he made great progress and made his way to the New World. His fighting power was comparable to Douglas Bullet. However, he was defeated miserably by Whitebeard, and his strength plummeted. The core problem was the decline of his hockey. 20 years later, after he walked out of Down and regained his belief in becoming the king of the pirates, he was able to fight against top pirates like Hawkeyes. However, given his strength breakthrough, I'm afraid he won't be able to sit still given his temper. A smile appeared on Gawain's lips, then a disdainful look appeared on his face. My growth rate is 10 times faster than yours. Even if you work so hard that you vomit blood, you still have to call me captain. Shaking his head to dispel the distracting thoughts in his mind, Gawain tightly grasped the Guan's mass immune in his hand, accelerated at his pace, and in just a few dozen seconds, he crossed a distance of nearly 1,000 meters and arrived at the harbor. The scene inside made him slightly stunned. The setting sun had left only a ray of light, making the sky look even more red but not as red as the blood all over the harbor. Kuro was covered in blood while standing in the harbor. One of his arms was twisted like a pretzel, and one leg was completely deformed. It was obvious that he was at the end of his rope and on the verge of reaching his limit. But his spirit and momentum were unprecedentedly high at this moment, so much so that Gawain frowned slightly when he saw it. In front of Kuro, Jin had already fallen into a pool of blood, his skin and flesh were rolled up and covered with scars. If it weren't for his chest still rising and falling, Gawain would have thought he was dead. Gawain, you're too slow. Kuro raised his trembling hand and subconsciously used his palm to push up his glasses. It took him several attempts before he succeeded. The cat claws on his hand were completely broken due to the countless collisions just now, and his fingers were all blue and purple. Despite being seriously injured, Kuro's tone was exceptionally calm. An easy life? I don't want it anymore. When I recover from my injury, I will be the captain. I will take the position of warlord, and I will fulfill our agreement. Gawain's expression showed an as expected look. Okay, But you have to get past me first. I will. Chapter 29, Weapons for Survival. You are still like this, too arrogant, as if everything is under your control. A smile appeared on Kuro's lips. You're facing a fleet of 5,000 people all by yourself, and your opponent is Admiral Krieg. Don't you feel anything? Gawain said calmly, I'm just afraid that I'll kill too fast and won't be able to sharpen my new sword. New sword? Kuro lowered his gaze and saw the Guan's Masamune in Gawain's hand, with a hint of envy in his eyes. Although he was not a swordsman, he had a good eye and could tell at a glance that the sword in Gawain's hand was countless times better than the knight's sword he previously had. When a powerful swordsman is equipped with a matching sword, the increase in combat power is not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2, but an exponential increase. Lucky guy. Gawain did not comment and continued, the plan has changed. We must keep this harbor. If you can still move, take the people on the ship to help the civilians in the harbor to take refuge. After completing this order, we won't have to worry about logistics issues in the East Blue anymore. Good. After saying that, Kuro was about to take a step when he felt his body lose strength and fell forward uncontrollably. Gawain reached out to support him, then he curled his lips and said, there is a limit to how tough you can be. Leave the evacuation to others. Don't die. I'm still waiting for you to give me some advice. After all, you are known as a man with 100 plans, and you have planned on everything. Snort. Kuro snorted coldly but stopped resisting. He allowed his subordinates to support him and limped away. As for the other crew, under Gawain's orders, they followed the surrounding guards to evacuate civilians in the harbor and participate in the rescue. The situation was quickly brought under control. Only the rows of warships in the distant sea, like a mountain, weighed on everyone's hearts. It was also at this time. The gunfire in the harbor gradually subsided. On the sea 1,000 meters away, Krieg held the Den Mushi and listened expressionlessly to his subordinates' report on the battle situation in Raven Harbor. Even Jin was defeated? Maybe I expected too much from him. Those who fall here are not eligible to follow me to the Grand Line. But before that, he has played his greatest value now that the internal armed forces have been disintegrated. Then I will clear the remaining obstacles, whether it's Kuro or Gawain. Krieg had a hint of a smile on his face as he spoke. The subordinates beside him put on the armor made of high-strength alloy on him piece by piece. As he put on the armor, Krieg felt a strong, or even unparalleled, sense of confidence. Bang! 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 His fingertips tapped lightly on the armor, making a crisp sound. Then Krieg looked into the distance, and the pirate ship under his feet suddenly accelerated at this moment, quickly distancing itself from the other pirate ships. As the harbor in the distance gets closer and closer, Krieg grabbed the spear, bent his legs slightly, jumped up from the deck, and then slammed heavily into the harbor. Boom! The floor was broken, and the air was filled with smoke. Gawain turned his head and saw the smoke and dust dissipate, and a tall figure gradually appeared. The exaggerated spear, the golden armor protecting his whole body, and the defiant face, the image of the visitor gradually completely overlapped with the impression of Krieg in Gawain's mind. Both Krieg's aura and the sense of oppression were countless times stronger before his disastrous defeat on the Grand Line in the future. Haki is the embodiment of spiritual power, and self-confidence will also bring unimaginable power. At this moment, Krieg even developed a kind of self-confidence that he was invincible, especially when he saw that his opponent was just a young man who still had a childish appearance. Are you White Knight Gawain? That's right. I'll give you two choices. Krieg looked at him with disdain, submit or die. I choose. Or. Gawain's lips curled up with a hint of teasing. Although Krieg in front of him was strong, he was ultimately unable to arouse the fighting spirit in him. Right now, in East Blue, the only one who can compete with him is Smoker, a Logia devil fruit user who came down from the Marine headquarters and is guarding Logtown like a final boss. But his sword, Guan's Masamune, which had not experienced a battle for a long time, was excited about the upcoming battle, and Gawain could even feel the humming of the blade. What a bloodthirsty fellow! Gawain muttered to himself. Krieg, in the distance, was no longer in the mood to listen. Since they couldn't come to an agreement, he would just use the fastest speed and the most brutal means to put an end to the opponent in front of him. In that case, then I'd like you to die. After speaking, Krieg swept the spear in his hand and prepared to press towards Gawain. The spear, weighing more than a ton, even if just swung, was enough to cause gusts of air in the air, blowing Gawain's golden hair before it got close. Just when Gawain was about to draw his sword, Krieg suddenly changed his action. His left hand, hidden under his cloak, suddenly stretched out and threw a poison gas bomb at Gawain. Boom! The poison gas bomb exploded with a loud bang, and purple dust and smoke filled the air, which was blown around by the wind. Krieg, who had already put on a gas mask, smiled grimly. The purpose of weapons is to defeat the strongest opponent at the lowest cost. Why fight a difficult battle when there is an easy way to win? This is an MH5 poison gas bomb. A normal person will die if they inhale even a tiny bit of it. Even a pirate with a bounty of 8 million would find it difficult to withstand it. Don't you agree, White Knight Goblin? Go and die with regret and resentment. You but halfway through his words, a creepy feeling rushed up from the soles of his feet to the top of his head, and a dazzling silver light emerged from the poisonous smoke. In a panic, Krieg could only barely raise his hand to block, and then he saw a silver light cutting through the purple poisonous smoke and rushing towards him, knocking him dozens of meters away and hitting the wall heavily. Boom! The wall collapsed with a loud bang, and broken stone slabs fell from above. Krieg pushed away the rocks and struggled to stand up from the ruins with a blank look on his face. How could a human launch such an attack? It must be. You. Goblin, who covered his mouth and nose with one hand, slowly walked out of the poisonous smoke and looked at Krieg with pity. He already knew this guy's character. In the battle between Krieg and Luffy in the manga, in terms of hard power, he could not catch up with Luffy at that time, but he relied on various despicable means to force Luffy into a desperate situation. When it comes to fighting, he's weak, but when it comes to the little moves during the battle, Krieg is definitely one of the best in the world of pirates. How could Goblin let down his guard in front of such a person? From the moment the battle began, he was on guard against his despicable methods. All the flying slash didn't go through? Goblin said with a hint of regret. Krieg was stunned when he heard this, and then he felt a piercing pain in his arm. He lowered his head and realized. The armor he had built for survival, which he considered strong enough to fight in the Grand Line, could not withstand even a single blow from Goblin's attack. The armor was completely cut open, even damaging his bones and flesh. Chapter 30, The Strong and the Weak. What kind of nonsense is this? Krieg spat out a mouthful of blood foam, grabbed the spear, and looked at Goblin with extreme vigilance. I was originally planning to cut off your arm directly. Goblin's tone was calm as if he was stating a fact, but it doesn't matter. Just now, this guy and I were not familiar with each other's abilities. I roughly know how much force to use in the next strike. Bastard. After saying that, Krieg swung the spear in his hand again and rushed towards Goblin. The pain in his arm made his mind clearer. He can't let Goblin use that kind of attack again. This time, it was his arm with armor to block it. Next time, it might be his exposed head. With his strength, just one hit, no, even a hit is not necessary. The explosion caused by the spear tip alone would be enough to kill the man in front of him. With these thoughts swirling in his mind, Krieg's face was filled with murderous intent. Even though he was wearing heavy armor and running wildly with a spear weighing more than a ton, Krieg's speed was still far beyond that of an ordinary person. In less than a second, he crossed the distance between them, and the heavy spear smashed down at Goblin like a hammer. Die. Krieg's speed seemed as fast as lightning to ordinary people, but in Goblin's eyes, it was as slow as the tortoise. Slow. Too slow. So slow that it makes him feel bored. He slightly turned sideways to avoid the sharpest tip of the spear. Then, his sword, which was over 1 meter long, slashed from top to bottom. Guan's massive sharp blade swept across the largest and hardest spearhead, then cut through Krieg's breastplate and penetrated deep into his flesh. However, during this process, Goblin did not feel any resistance at all. It was obvious that Guan's massive sharpness was beyond his expectations. Whoosh! Blood spurted out from Krieg's chest and abdomen. His body, which had been rushing forward, fell on its back. The severe pain made him lose consciousness for a moment. Not only was the thickest and hardest breastplate directly cut open by Goblin's sword, but the spear that Krieg regarded as a secret weapon also slowly broke from the slash at the tip. Bang! After the heavy sound of falling to the ground, black gunpowder from the broken end of the gunhead scattered like dust. According to the total amount of black powder stored in the gunheads, if all of them exploded, it would be enough to destroy a warship. At this moment, the sea breeze blew away this black powder. It was not until the scattered black powder hit his face that Krieg came to his senses and realized what had happened. How is that possible? The man standing in front of him indifferently was so powerful that his ability had already exceeded the limit of his cognition. In his nearly 40 years of life experience, there is only one word that can accurately describe the man in front of him. Monster. Who the hell are you? Just an ordinary pirate targeting the Grand Line. Goblin's tone was so indifferent that it even carried a hint of pity. Krieg, who was almost disemboweled, fell to the ground and gasped for breath, but he gritted his teeth and asked the last question in his mind. There shouldn't be many monsters like you, even in the Grand Line, right? Monster? Goblin chuckled. In a world like that, people like me can't be called monsters. Compared to those people who can easily destroy islands or even countries, I'm as insignificant as dust floating in the air. You lied to me. Krieg spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face turned visibly pale. If a person like you can't even navigate the Grand Line, then what's the point of all the weapons I built for survival? Survival? The pity in Gawain's eyes became even stronger. But it was like a sharp knife piercing Krieg's heart, which was a pain far more unbearable than the physical wounds. Krieg gritted his teeth and heard Gawain's indifferent voice. Why would a strong person forge weapons just to survive? Krieg's pupils shrank, and his mouth opened. He wanted to refute but was unable to say anything. Gawain continued, only the weak will build equipment to adapt to the environment, while the strong will change the environment until they shape the world to their own liking. Whether you are willing to admit it or not, from the very beginning, you have been pure. Weakling. Gawain's words seemed to have given Krieg the final verdict. The faith that had been supporting this man collapsed at this moment, and his expression was almost exactly the same as when he was at Barity in the manga. But this time, it was not Hawkeye's but Gawain who brought him this disastrous defeat. Gawain did not have the habit of playing cat and mouse, he preferred to cut the grass and root it out. Whoosh! Gawain swung his sword to shake off the blood on it and walked towards Krieg slowly. The few seconds seemed like a century in Krieg's eyes. Never before had he felt that death was so close to him. The cowardice that is engraved in the bones of the weak is fully aroused at this moment. Tears gushed from the tear glands, and clear mucus flows from his nose. Please spare me, I beg you. I have money, I can be your subordinate, I have a lot of fleets. Gawain shook his head. It seems that you still don't understand. The moment you set foot in Raven Harbor and attacked me, the current outcome was doomed. Guan's mass immune was held high by Gawain. When he looked at Krieg, there was only indescribable pity and boredom in his eyes. Such an opponent no longer interests him. If he knew what Kiro had been thinking, he would certainly understand why Kiro made that choice. Boring. It can really drive a person crazy. When everything becomes boring, it is better to find a quiet village and wait for death than to drift on the sea. Fortunately, Gawain knew that there were countless mountains waiting for him to climb in Paradise and New World. He doesn't know when his purpose after coming to this world changed without him even realizing it. Certain traits hidden in the genes that were suppressed in the previous civilized society were gradually awakened by power and killing. There is no place for the weak in this ocean. As he spoke, the silver-white sword in Gawain's hand fell, but it stopped the moment it touched Krieg's neck skin. I'll give you my life in exchange for his. Jin, who was lying in a pool of blood, had woken up at some point and was kneeling on the ground, almost pressing his head into the soil. Under the double damage of the wounds left by Kuro's cat claws and the poison gas, his body was only one step away from death. He was able to speak at this time, all thanks to his strong will. As long as you let the captain go, I can give everything. Please. At this moment, not only did Gawain stop his actions, but even Krieg was momentarily distracted. But he returned to his former cold and ruthless appearance the next moment. While Gawain's attention was completely attracted to Jin, Krieg stood up and jumped towards Jin, grabbed the latter's arm, and threw it at Gawain. Don't blame me. Jin. I want to live. Don't get on my boat in your next life. Chapter 31, White Hunter in midair. Jin's body blocked Gawain's view and Krieg's ferocious expression. Krieg covered his wound with one hand, raised his intact arm, bent his fingers slightly, and pulled the trigger hidden inside. Bang! Sharp armor-piercing bullets shot out from the mechanism inside Krieg's armor at a speed so fast that a noticeable sonic boom was heard in the air. This is a weapon designed specifically for breaking through enemy armor and even warships. It can easily penetrate even 10-centimeter thick steel plates. Krieg didn't think anyone could survive this blow, especially since it was a sneak attack. He wants to pierce through both of them with one blow. Die. As Krieg grinned, Gawain's figure suddenly disappeared. A silver-white light flashed in the air, and the sharp flying slash cut the bullet in the middle and, penetrating Krieg's body, the speed did not slow down, and it cut through the sea surface and disappeared at the end of the sight. It was only at this moment that Jin's body fell to the ground with a bang. He also completely lost consciousness after seeing Krieg's body split in half from the middle. Gawain's attention was completely attracted by the sword in his hand. The feeling of using it as if it were an extension of his arm was something that even the knight's sword that had accompanied its predecessor for several years had never felt before, and it went straight to the depths of the soul. It's not that Krieg's armor is not strong enough, but Guan's mass immune is too sharp. Just the flying slash has such power. It's like cutting iron like mud. From today on, we are partners. Guan's mass immune. There was a slight sound coming from the sword in his hand. This also made Gawain more convinced that these 21 great-grade blades that were highly sought after in the world of One Piece all possessed self-will in a certain sense. Whoosh! After shaking off the blood on the blade, Gawain turned around and faced the fleet in the distance. On the sea, dozens of pirate ships stopped completely the moment they witnessed Krieg's defeat. The lookouts looked at the scene here and were so shocked that they were speechless. Especially when they saw the body lying in the harbor, neatly cut in half, they felt a horror that came from the bottom of their soul. The captain. The captain is dead. Jin Sama was also defeated, and his life or death is unknown. What should we do? Fight or flight? Panic spread from the harbor all the way to the pirate ship. Krieg, who once had an invincible image in their hearts, died so miserably that no one knew what they should do next. In just a moment, the fleet that covered the sea turned around and left at a much faster speed than when it came, but found thick smoke billowing on the sea in the distance. Everyone's vision was completely blocked by the white smoke, and only the roar of the engine was getting louder and louder. What is that? When did the fog rise over the sea? No. It's smoke. No, it's from that person, a man riding a bike with 3 wheels. Damn, his whole body is made of white smoke. Accompanied by the exclamations of the Krieg pirates. A strangely shaped bike with 3 wheels sailed at the sea in the distance, raising waves several meters high behind it. At the same time, everyone also saw the figure of the person coming. He had strong features, a ferocious look, and a head full of short white hair without a single eyebrow. He had 2 cigars between his lips, and his open clothes inadvertently revealed his strong body. It is none other than Smoker, the Marine known as the White Hunter. He graduated from the Marine School several years ago but did not choose to stay in the Marine headquarters like his peers. Instead, he came to Logetown alone to serve as the last line of defense for the East Blue Marines. Looking at the fleeing Krieg pirates in the distance, Smoker frowned slightly. Just as he was feeling puzzled, his eyes met with Galvin, who was standing in the harbor with a sword, and sparks flickered faintly in the air. White Knight Galvin? That guy, Nezumi, actually caught a big fish. Smoker immediately understood why the Krieg pirates were defeated so easily. After all, in most cases, the bounty of a pirate is equivalent to combat power. This is especially true when Krieg, whose bounty is worth 15 million, faces a man whose bounty is 3 times his. After a moment of hesitation, Smoker made up his mind. Focus on the big and let go of the small. Without Krieg's leadership, the remaining members of Krieg pirates would never amount to anything. But Galvin is different. The threat he poses alone is greater than that of all the pirates present combined. Seeing the bike with the Marines logo whizzing by, the pirates present couldn't help but feel a little relieved that they had survived the disaster. Just because they recognized the identity of the person who came. That guy is Smoker, the White Hunter, a monster guarding Logetown. For so many years, no pirate has been able to enter the Grand Line. The biggest reason is that they can't get past him. According to the survivors, that guy ate a devil fruit and gained the ability to turn into smoke, making him invulnerable. Swords or guns can't hurt his body. There's no way. There's no way to fight him at all. We run. The Krieg pirates, who had already lost all their will to fight because of Galvin's presence, now fled in all directions like crazy. Galvin looked up into the distance, and the only thing in his sight was Smoker, who was getting closer. If there is still an opponent in East Blue who can inspire him to fight but against whom he is helpless, Smoker in front of him is definitely on the list. After all, he's a Logia Devil Fruit user. Even the weakest Logia Devil Fruit user can run rampant in front of those who can't use armament hockey. You should know that after One Piece enters the Grand Line, the first 2 bosses are both Logia Fruit users and their oppressive feelings are far greater than those of Lucci in Water 7 and Gecko Moria in Thriller Bark. All he can say is that if Luffy hadn't found their weakness and hadn't eaten the Nika fruit, the Straw Hat Pirates would never have been able to pass these 2 levels. Here comes a troublesome guy. Galvin frowned. If it were just him, there would be no problem in getting away. But now that Kuro is seriously injured and there are subordinates disguised as Marines in the harbor, he can't just take care of himself and let Smoker easily take over Raven Harbor. Thinking of this, Galvin took out the Den Den Mushi and called Kuro. Kuro, listen to me now. Krieg is dead but a formidable guy, and I can only hold him back temporarily. There are still Marines in the East Blue that you can't handle? On the other end of the Den Den Mushi, Kuro, who had just bandaged his wound, frowned gradually, and it was obvious that he also realized the seriousness of the problem. Galvin continued, at least before I mastered the armament hockey, that guy's ability was a dimensionality reduction attack for us. What do you need me to do? He is in the harbor, and our ship has been burned. You will definitely not be able to go out to sea. Go find Lord Gaza first. She will find a way to help you find a hiding place. Kuro nodded, okay. Chapter 32, Galvin vs. Smoker Snap. After Galvin hung up the Den Den Mushi, he looked up at the sea in the distance. Thick smoke billowed, completely obscuring his view, and the only sound was the roar of the engine getting closer. The influence of the Logia Devil Fruit on the environment was fully demonstrated at this moment, far greater than Galvin had previously known. At this moment, His observation hockey has just awakened and he has not yet fully mastered it, so he cannot apply it in actual combat. But even if it was out of instinct, Gawain could still feel the ferocious aura like a ferocious beast hidden in the thick fog. The sword in his palm was so excited that it began to tremble. It was obvious that Krieg just now did not satisfy it at all, but the opponent in front of him definitely did. No probing is required. Gawain could judge the strength of the person who came, which was the same as his own, a bronze level that was not available in the East Blue. Here it comes. Gawain focused his eyes and saw a tall figure suddenly rushing out from the white smoke. If not Smoker, then who else? With the help of the thrust generated by the thick smoke gushing out behind him, he accelerated so fast that it was almost impossible to catch him with sight. Smoker took advantage of the momentum to thrust Nanashakujit forward fiercely. Every move is a killing move. Obviously, he is extremely confident in his fighting ability. How arrogant. The corner of Gawain's mouth curled up slightly in a smile, and the rising fighting spirit made him hold his sword even tighter so that the veins on the back of his hand popped out. Smoker in front of him is the strongest opponent he has ever encountered, even if the almost unsolvable Logia fruit is excluded. After all, how could a man who was from the Marine headquarters and trained by Zephyr be mediocre? In the manga, Smoker suffered a lot of setbacks, but that was in the New World, where monsters roamed everywhere, not in the East Blue. Only with such performance can one be worthy of the title of White Hunter. Gawain sighed in his heart, but the sword in his hand stretched out like a snake and deflected Smoker's attack. Squeak. The sharp blade rubbed against the steel, and sparks flashed in the air. The two looked at each other. Smoker's eyes were filled with great solemnity. In just a moment, he determined a shocking or expected fact: the man in front of him and the other pirates in the East Blue are creatures from two different levels. You have to know that his attack was launched by taking advantage of the momentum, giving him the upper hand. But Gawain still easily resolved it. Anyone who can achieve this level can make a name for himself, not only in the East Blue but also in the Grand Line. How can there be a guy like you in the East Blue? Gawain smiled faintly. Hasn't there been a monster like Roger before? Roger is special, different from the others. Smoker's eyes were stern, but he didn't want to waste any more words with Gawain. Seeing that his attack failed, he swept the Nanashakujit in his hands like knives. After Gawain dodged the attack by leaning sideways, Smoker took advantage of the situation to pursue him. His Nanashakujit danced in the air, creating a sky full of black shadows as he pressed towards Gawain like a curtain of rain. The Nanashakujit was originally a weapon designed to restrain swords, and the one in Smoker's hand was specially customized to suit his identity as a Logia user. The sea prism stone inlaid on the top is not only a natural nemesis for devil fruit users, but its hardness is also enough to withstand the blows of famous swords. The next moment, bang, bang, bang. The intensive attack fell like raindrops, smashing the floor beneath his feet into pieces. However, in such intensive attacks, Gawain's expression did not change at all, only his body and heart gradually became hotter, and his latent fighting instinct was gradually fully awakened by Smoker's attack. Compared to Krieg, Smoker in front of him is the opponent worth fighting. Come. After a loud shout, Smoker's downward attack suddenly stopped. It was because the sword in Gawain's hand swung at a faster speed, blocking all of his mid-air slashes. Sparks flew in the air, and the two men, equally eager to fight, instinctively swung their weapons. In such a high-speed confrontation, thinking and hesitation are just burdens that slow down the speed of attack. You can only leave everything to your instincts, your fighting spirit, and your will to win. Only then can you find that opportunity to win in the increasingly fierce fight. Boom. 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 With every collision, Smoker felt his arm shaking uncontrollably, and an unsettling fact came to his mind: what's going on? This guy is even faster. He draws his sword at least 30% faster than at the beginning. What accompanied Smoker's confusion was a complete reversal of the situation. Whoosh! There was a sharp sound breaking through the air, and Guan's Masamune slashed across Smoker's face, almost cutting his face in half. But not a drop of blood flowed out, only white smoke rolled up, and the cut disappeared in an instant. Sure enough, the ability to transform into natural elements is troublesome. Gawain sighed, but the sword in his hand continued to strike, leaving countless wounds on Smoker's body, but he avoided them all by turning his body into smoke. This special ability to almost completely avoid physical attacks makes the Logia fruit the one with the highest lower limit among the three types of devil fruit. In an encounter, it can be said that there is almost no solution without the armament hockey. After this battle, armament hockey must be put on the agenda. A trace of solemnity appeared in Gawain's eyes. This ability that only allows him to hit you but not you to hit him can almost be said to be cheating. What's even more disgusting is that it's really frustrating to fight. It seems that you also know the ability of the Logia fruit. You don't have the armament hockey, So even if you can suppress me in a fight, you can't cause any harm to me. Smoker had a blank expression on his face, but in his heart, he was extremely shocked by Gawain's fighting power. He was not originally from East Blue but was an elite trained by Zephyr at the Marine Academy. The place where he should have been fighting was not the East Blue but the Grand Line. But now he was suppressed in the East Blue to the point that he had to rely on his own devil fruit ability. If Ina and others knew about this, he would definitely be laughed at by them. You're too dangerous. I can't let you go. Smoker's eyes became increasingly gloomy, and he already had the intention to kill. White Launcher. He took a deep puff of his cigar and suddenly activated the ability of the plume fruit. The billowing white smoke spread out in all directions, condensing into countless smoke columns like white snakes, sweeping toward Gawain. White Snake. Gawain retreated back violently and swung the sword in his hand in the air. The silver-white flying slash shot out, instantly blowing away all the smoke condensed by Smoker. Without the attachment of armament hockey, the invisible white smoke is still too weak in terms of lethality. However, it was not until the surrounding white smoke had completely dissipated that Gawain realized that Smoker had long disappeared in the distance, and he looked up suddenly. Then he saw the tip of the Nanashakujit getting bigger and bigger in his eyes. I succeeded. In midair, a smile appeared on Smoker's lips. White smoke is weak in terms of lethality, but in East Blue, where observation hockey has not yet become popular, it plays an incomparable role in feint attacks. Don't be a pirate in your next life. Chapter 33, Infinite Protrusion Bang. Nanashakujit fell to the ground, shattering the floor and raising dust and smoke around them. Smoker's brows were tightly furrowed. The attack that seemed almost certain to succeed ended up failing, and now he even lost track of his opponent. It was not just a matter of his moves being seen through. What's more important is how Gawain disappeared so suddenly. Instant transmission? Or devil fruit ability? Neither. Gawain's voice came from his ears, and Smoker suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He turned around and saw a ghostly phantom coming from a distance. Pussyfoot maneuver. A violent and swift thrust pierced through Smoker's body in an instant. Even though he transformed into smoke in advance to avoid Gawain's attack, he lost sight of the target in the next instant. The white smoke that was originally used to limit Gawain's vision now became a limitation for himself. Smoker came to his senses and looked around in horror. This speed, a devil fruit? No, he did it with his flesh, but to be able to do this with a human body. Smoker was halfway through his words when another loud shout came from the distance. Infinite Protrusion. A faster and more violent thrust passed through the dust and smoke again, directly breaking up Smoker's body, which had just been condensed. This kind of attack can't cause any harm to me. What else can it do except delay time? Are you stalling? Smoker suddenly realized what was happening and felt a sense of urgency. However, as soon as he took action, he found that what was waiting for him was Gawain's almost endless thrusts. Whoosh! The body condensed again and again but was dispersed in the next moment. In just a few breaths, the almost continuous attacks completely suppressed Smoker. If it weren't for his ability to be immune to physical attacks, he would have died countless times already. Realizing this, Smoker felt extremely humiliated. The opponent's speed is too fast. Even his eyesight could barely see a blurry black shadow, and he had no means of countering. If I had mastered the observation hockey, I wouldn't be so passive. Recalling Zephyr's instructions before leaving the headquarters, Smoker couldn't help feeling a little regretful, but he quietly clenched his hands tighter. As the offensive became more intense, Gawain felt that his moves were becoming smoother. The pussyfoot maneuver move requires extremely high physical fitness. It just so happens that his physical fitness is far superior to Kuro's, and he also has an ultra-fast nerve reflex speed that Kuro does not have. The degree of completion of the pussyfoot maneuver is naturally higher, and the speed is far faster than that of Kuro. With a newly acquired sword, Guan's mass immune, even the simplest thrust would unleash unimaginable power. The crisscrossing cuts in the harbor were the best proof of this. With the combination of the two, Gawain became more adept at this tactic of suppressing his opponents with incredible speed. If Smoker was not a Logia fruit user, he would have almost no ability to counter-attack against Gawain's endless thrusts. This was a move that Gawain developed based on Kuro's indiscriminate attack, a move that was unique to him and that allowed him to suppress his opponents with speed. Infinite Protrusion. A thrust attack that was driven by extreme speed. The fight turned into a one-sided beating from this point on. The captain of the guard team, who came to the harbor to investigate the war situation under Gaz's order, was stunned when he saw this scene. All he could see was endless white smoke and a white-haired man made of smoke, which was constantly being broken up and reassembled. The white smoke accumulated in the harbor seemed to be completely torn apart by some invisible creature. What on earth just happened? The Kama Atachi from the Legend of Wano country? The evil wind that reaps lives? Although the scene in the harbor was truly outrageous, the captain of the guard still recorded it truthfully and passed the information in the harbor to Gaza through Den Mushi. Captain. Gaza raised her hand to her forehead. I asked you to look for Gawain, but you tell me about an invisible thing, Marines, and white smoke? No. Kuro, who was standing next to Gaza, reached out and patted her shoulder. The invisible thing he was talking about must be Gawain. Major Gawain is a comma at Achi? Gaza was even more confused. Kuro said expressionlessly, you can think of it as a super fast movement ability. Is that so? Gaza is relieved, so it seems that Gawain is the one who has the upper hand right now. The upper hand? Of course, he has the upper hand. The corner of Kuro's mouth twitched. From the guard's description, how could he not understand that Gawain's control over pussyfoot maneuver was even higher than his own? Isn't it a bit outrageous that a pirated version is better than the original? However, thinking of his awakened observation haki, Kuro still has confidence in himself. Only after having come into contact with the power of observation haki can one understand the huge gap between having and not having. It is no exaggeration to say that the gap is a dimensionality reduction attack. Gawain, the time when I surpass you is not far away. Mr. Locke? Gaza looked at Kuro in confusion, and the latter immediately returned to his calm expression and said, are there any other ships that can leave the harbor? Our identities are sensitive, and we cannot have direct contact with the Marines. Gaza was stunned for a moment, then shook her head. We originally had spare boats, but we just received a report that those boats had already been taken away by the refugees and... Seeing Kuro's brows gradually frowning, Gaza saw his concerns. If you are concerned about the Marines as follow-up search, I can help. Without a search warrant, even the Marines can't do anything to the Lord's house. Kuro's expression softened, and he said to Gaza, that's troublesome. This is what I should do. After all, we will still need your strength to maintain stability around Raven Harbor. It's getting late at night. In the harbor, the sea breeze gradually rose, blowing away the endless white smoke. After fighting for dozens of minutes, the two men gradually became exhausted. At this moment, they stopped tacitly and faced each other from a distance. Gawain was sweating all over and breathing heavily. To be honest, he really has no way to deal with the Logia fruit user now. The Logia fruit, at this time, is basically a dimensionality reduction attack. Even if he used a trick like infinite protrusion, he could at most hold Smoker back. It's not like he didn't try to snatch the Nanashaku Jit from Smoker's hand. After all, that thing is a natural nemesis for people with devil fruit, and if he gets his hands on it, it will directly kill the game. But Smoker had been prepared for this. As soon as Gawain showed his unusual interest in the Nanashaku Jit, Smoker threw it into the sea with a simple and neat move. The reaction is scary fast. Little did he know that at this moment, Smoker felt like he had eaten shit. It's like a ghost. This guy even knows that the top of his weapon is made of sea prism stone. There's an undercover agent in the Marine. If he hadn't thrown it quickly, that thing would have turned into a sharp blade to stab him. But at this moment, a whistle sounded on the sea in the distance, and a huge warship cut through the wind and waves and sailed into the harbor. Gawain turned his head and saw a figure standing on the deck. Even in the dark, he could still see it with his sharp eyesight. The person who came was Tashigi, with short blue hair and slightly dull square-framed glasses, holding a long sword. Behind her was a group of Marines armed with live ammunition. It's time to go. Chapter 34, Don't Die. Seeing the Marines arrive, Gawain couldn't help but feel like backing out. By now, in the battle, he had delayed Smoker's progress for dozens of minutes. If Kuro hasn't found a way to escape or hide his whereabouts after such a long time, then he should consider changing the second-in-command. Thinking of this, Gawain turned around and prepared to leave, but his eyes paused slightly after he noticed a familiar figure in the white smoke. Jin, who had already been seriously injured, had completely lost the strength to resist at this moment. He lay powerlessly on the ground while blood oozing from the wounds on his body. Only the slightly rising and falling chest proved that he was still alive. Lucky guy. Gawain curled his lips and disappeared from the spot the next moment, along with Jin's body. Raven Harbor. As the battle ended, the smoke and dust gradually dissipated, and Tashigi led a group of Marines to quickly walk down from the warship. Captain Smoker, how's the battle going? White Knight Gawain is a very dangerous guy, more dangerous than I expected. Smoker looked towards where Gawain disappeared, his face extremely solemn. I have a feeling that if we can't detain him while he's still in the East Blue, a character like Red Hair might appear in the New World in a few years. As he spoke, Smoker raised his arms. Only then did he realize that the fingers that had been clenching his Nanashaku Jit were now trembling a little. He clenched his 5 fingers into a fist and said coldly, Raven Harbor has no other outlet to the sea. Let's seal off the harbor first. Only people are allowed to enter but not leave. Also, Take out my spare weapon at the ship. Dashigi was stunned and reminded, the spare one doesn't have sea prism stone, so its hardness and ability to suppress devil fruit users are greatly reduced. That's the one I want. So the other party even took away your weapon? Dashigi took a deep breath and became extremely wary of Gawain, a pirate she had never met before. She knew Smoker's strength very well. She was the best among his peers. It would be a waste of talent if he was placed in the East Blue. Anyone who could beat Smoker so hard that he lost his temper and had his weapons taken away would be a tough guy, even in the Grand Line. Captain Smoker, what the hell? Just as Dashigi was about to continue asking, she saw her boss's face darken, and Smoker almost bit off the 2 cigars in his mouth. Don't ask questions you shouldn't ask. Yes. Dashigi subconsciously stood up straight. While she was thinking, she heard Smoker's low voice, by the way, find 2 people to see if they can help me pick up my weapon at the sea. It's probably in that location. After all, it's a specially made weapon, and it's very expensive. It's worth several years of my salary. Dashigi had a black question mark on her face. So it was knocked into the sea by his opponent? Smoker sighed, I told you not to ask, I threw it in. Dashigi looked confused. What is this operation? Smoker simply skipped the topic and focused his attention on the burning harbor in the distance. Also, send some Marines to help the guards in the harbor with the rescue work. Yes. Smoker nodded, then looked solemnly towards the place where Gawain disappeared. I will personally lead a team to search the harbor. We must keep that guy here this time. Otherwise, it will be a shame for us if he really goes to the Grand Line. Soon, rows of Marines, led by Dashigi, spread out into the harbor, rescuing civilians and conducting a carpet search of any hiding places in the harbor. From residential areas to commercial districts and then to the peripheral black markets, nothing was gained except for capturing a few fugitives. The next morning, the sun gradually rose, sunlight shone into the harbor, and the situation gradually came under the control of the Marines. Smoker listened to the information sent back, then looked at the map of Raven Harbor and frowned slightly. You said that there was another group of Marines rescuing civilians in the harbor before us? That's right. Dashigi nodded, but it's strange. After our people took over the harbor, these people began to leave in an organized manner. Even in the end, we didn't know which base they came from. Captain Smoker, do you think it could be someone left behind by Captain Nezumi? Smoker sneered. Compared to scum like Nezumi, I would rather believe that they are pirates in disguise. However, although we don't know which base these Marines are from, they are probably not enemies. Our top priority now is to capture White Knight Gawain first. Smoker pointed to the core location on the map. The only place we haven't searched yet is the Lord's Mansion. This. Dashigi hesitated slightly. We don't have an internal search warrant. It would be against the rules to search the Lord's Mansion directly. Rule? Smoker sneered. How many times in the past have we watched pirates escape and cause new unrest in the next place just because of these meaningless things? These old-fashioned things should have been burned down long ago. Catching pirates and killing evil is the rule. Follow me. Yes. At the same time, in the Lord's Mansion. When the Marines led by Dashigi entered the harbor, Kuro ordered his subordinates to retreat to the Lord's Mansion in an organized manner. Now, most of the people in Gawain's pirate group have gathered here. The doctor in the Lord's Mansion was treating everyone's wounds. The wounds on their body were minor matters, the complex expressions in everyone's eyes seemed more real. I didn't expect that our mission this time was not to take advantage of the opportunity to rob or escape but to rescue people. A pirate who originally belonged to Kuro's ship took out a candy that had already been deformed from his arms with a somewhat sad expression. When I rescued that girl from the rubble, the look on her face is something I will never forget. Even though we didn't attack the nearby towns when we followed Captain Gawain, those people looked at us with fear on their faces. You don't know, that old lady even held my hand and said she wanted to marry her daughter to me. This is really... How can she let her daughter marry a pirate? Ha 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 ha. As they talked about what they had seen and heard today, they felt their hearts gradually being filled with something they had never felt before. As they talked, tears welled up in the corners of their eyes. Kuro watched coldly, muttering, this style doesn't look like a pirate. But they are content, aren't they? Gaza looked at the pirates in Marines' uniforms and smiled. After all, they are Mr. Gawain's subordinates. They are different from other pirates. Even though he has lost his knighthood, he still adheres to the spirit of chivalry.